I turned 18 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't blown out a single candle. My name's Evan, and if you told me a year ago that my own parents would cancel my birthday just to keep my brother from throwing a tantrum, I would have laughed and said, "No way. That's too obvious even for them." But here we are. My family has always revolved around my younger brother, Ryan. He's 16, and to put it nicely, he thinks the sun rises and sets for him. If he gets a bad grade, Mom emails the teacher to argue it. If he gets in trouble at school, Dad lectures the principal about understanding Ryan's needs. And if Ryan so much as frowns, the entire household goes silent, waiting to figure out how to make him happy again. Meanwhile, I've been the easy kid. I get good grades, stay out of trouble, cook my own food, do my laundry. You'd think that would earn me a little respect. Instead, it just makes me invisible. When my birthday was coming up, I didn't even ask for much. Just a small dinner with my grandparents and a cake. I saved up for my own gift, a used acoustic guitar I found online. For once, I wanted to feel like my day mattered, like I wasn't just the background character in Ryan's world. Mom nodded distractedly when I told her my plans, and Dad muttered something about checking his schedule. That was enough for me. I figured they were on board. I even spent 2 hours cleaning the house so it would look nice for when everyone came over. The day before my birthday, Ryan had a meltdown over the dumbest thing imaginable. Dad wouldn't let him borrow the car for a late-night party. He slammed doors, threw his shoes down the hallway, and started yelling about how no one cares about him and how Evan always gets whatever he wants. I just sat in my room, headphones in, trying to stay out of it. But I could still hear every word. My chest felt tight. Ryan has always had this way of making me feel guilty for existing. Eventually, I heard Mom knock on my door and say, "Evan, we need to talk." She sat on the edge of my bed with that look, the one that means she's about to say something that benefits Ryan at my expense. "Honey," she said, in that soft tone she uses when she's trying to act reasonable, "we're going to have to postpone your birthday dinner. Ryan is really upset right now, and we don't want to trigger him with a big celebration tomorrow." I just stared at her. "Postpone. It's my 18th birthday. You only turn 18 once." Her smile thinned. "I know, but we can celebrate next weekend when things calm down. It'll be better for everyone. Better for everyone." Translation, better for Ryan. My fists curled against my bedsheets. Dad poked his head into my room to add, "Just let this go, Evan. Be the mature one here." The mature one. The phrase burned worse than anything else they'd said. I nodded slowly, but inside, I felt something shift. For years I'd been swallowing my frustration, convincing myself it wasn't worth making a scene. But this was the line. They had just told me, point blank, that my birthday was less important than keeping Ryan from throwing a fit. The next morning, my grandparents called to wish me happy birthday. When I told them dinner was postponed, there was a long pause before my grandpa said, "Postponed? For what?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just felt this cold, quiet anger settle in my chest, like a storm forming far off in the distance. That was the moment I knew something had to change. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the blank space where a cake should have been, and I started planning my next move. The day after my canceled birthday felt strangely quiet, like the house itself knew something was off. I went through the motions, made breakfast, got ready for school, but there was this dull heaviness in my chest that wouldn't go away. Mom cheerfully acted like nothing had happened, and Ryan came downstairs late, yawning and smirking like he'd just won some great battle. He ruffled my hair as he passed me, which he knows I hate, and said, "Cheer up, Evan. It's just a birthday. Just a birthday." The words stuck to me like wet clothes. That night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen while I was upstairs doing homework. They were praising Ryan for calming down after his tantrum, like he'd just performed some heroic feat. Then Mom said, "I think it's good we delayed Evan's party. It shows Ryan we're willing to compromise." Compromise. That's what they called erasing my 18th birthday. Over the next week, little things kept piling up, each one scraping against me like sandpaper. Ryan decided he wanted to host a study session at the house with his friends, which, of course, meant loud music and video games more than any actual studying, and Mom asked me to make myself scarce so I wouldn't distract them. I ended up eating a sandwich in my room with headphones on, even though I had a test the next day and really wanted to use the dining table to work. Then there was the grocery store incident. Mom took me along to help her carry things, and when Ryan texted her asking for a specific energy drink, she sent me running back down 3 aisles to grab it. When I came back, slightly out of breath, she didn't even thank me. Just said, "You should be more considerate, Evan." Ryan had a rough week. I wanted to shout, "So did I." But instead I bit my tongue until I could taste iron. Things escalated 2 days later when I finally worked up the courage to ask about rescheduling my birthday dinner. I caught Mom while she was folding laundry and said, as casually as I could, "So, when are we doing my birthday thing? I'd like to invite Grandma and Grandpa." She didn't even look up. "Oh, honey, this weekend's no good. Ryan's got a soccer game, and we're taking him out to dinner afterward to celebrate." "Okay, what about next weekend?" "We'll see," she said, and then changed the subject like we were discussing the weather. I walked back to my room in a fog. It was like someone had quietly erased my birthday from the calendar, like it never existed. That night at dinner, Ryan complained that he needed new cleats for his upcoming tournament. Dad immediately said, "We'll make it work," even though we just talked about how money was tight. I glanced at the corner of the fridge where the grocery budget list hung, and I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Didn't we say no extras this month?" Dad shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't be selfish, Evan. Your brother's future depends on this tournament. These things are an investment." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded. Ryan's future involved playing JV soccer and quitting half his hobbies whenever they got hard. But I kept my mouth shut and finished my dinner in silence, my appetite gone. A few days later, I came home from school to find Ryan sitting at the kitchen counter eating the cake I'd bought for myself with my own money. It was a small vanilla cake I'd hidden in the back of the fridge, planning to eat with my grandparents when they came over that weekend, since Mom still hadn't scheduled anything. "Ryan, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. He grinned with frosting on his face. "Oh, this was yours? Mom said I could have some." "Chill, it's just cake. Just cake. Just a birthday. Just me being erased, one piece at a time." When I confronted Mom, she looked genuinely confused by my anger. "Evan, you're overreacting. Ryan needed a little pick-me-up after practice. Besides, you shouldn't be hiding food from the family." "It wasn't hidden," I said through gritted teeth. "It was mine. I paid for it." Her voice sharpened. "Watch your tone. We don't keep score in this family. You know how sensitive Ryan is right now. Don't make things harder on him." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and something else, clarity. For years, I've been telling myself that if I just stayed quiet, if I just did the right thing, my parents would eventually notice me, appreciate me, treat me fairly. But the truth was staring me in the face. They weren't going to change. The next week was a blur of small indignities. Ryan forgot to do his chores, so I was told to be a team player and take out the trash for him. He spilled soda on the living room rug and blamed me, and Mom believed him without question. And when I got an acceptance letter from the local college's honors program, Mom barely glanced at it before saying, "That's nice, dear," and then turning to ask Ryan how practice went. Each moment was like a drop of water wearing a hole into stone. My patience, my hope, my willingness to keep trying, all of it was eroding. Then came the breaking point. One Friday night, I came home from a late shift at my part-time job to find Ryan sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant it to be. He shrugged. "Relax. I just wanted to see if you had that game download I wanted." "You went through my phone without asking?" "Big deal," he said, tossing it back onto the bed. "You have nothing to hide anyway." When I told Mom and Dad, they didn't punish him. They didn't even tell him not to do it again. Instead, Dad said, "Ryan was just curious. Maybe if you weren't so secretive, he wouldn't feel the need to snoop." I stood there stunned. They were blaming me. That night, I sat at my desk and made a list, not of chores or homework, but of everything that had happened over the last month. The canceled birthday, the cake, the constant favoritism, the invasion of my privacy. By the time I was done, the page was full, my handwriting pressed so hard into the paper that it left dents. Looking at that list, I felt oddly calm. It was like seeing everything laid out finally gave me permission to admit that this wasn't just normal family stuff. This was a pattern, one that wasn't going to stop as long as I stayed under their roof. I started keeping my door locked whenever I could. I began moving some of my things, my guitar, my books, my laptop, into boxes and sliding them under my bed. Quietly, Carefully, I was getting ready. And then, just as I was beginning to think I could survive until graduation, something happened that pushed everything past the point of no return. 2 weeks after Ryan had gone through my phone, I came home one afternoon to find the front door wide open and voices carrying from inside. At first, I thought maybe we had company, but when I stepped into the living room, my heart dropped. My boxes, the ones I had carefully packed and slid under my bed, were sitting in the middle of the room, opened. My guitar case was leaning against the couch with the latches undone, my clothes were spilling out of the boxes, and my laptop sat on the coffee table like some kind of exhibit. Ryan was sitting cross-legged on the floor, grinning smugly, and Mom and Dad were standing over everything with their arms crossed. "What is this?" Dad asked, gesturing to my things. I froze in the doorway. "My stuff," I said slowly, already feeling my pulse quicken. "Why are you hiding it under your bed?" Mom demanded, her voice sharp. "Are you planning to run away?" I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Ryan piped up. "Told you he was being shady. I caught him packing last night." "You what?" I snapped, turning to him. He just smirked. "Yeah, I looked under your bed while you were in the shower. Pretty clever hiding spot, by the way. You went through my room?" My voice cracked, partly from anger, partly from the raw humiliation of having my privacy violated again. "Ryan was worried about you," Mom said, like he was some kind of hero. "He thought you might be in trouble, and it turns out he was right." "Evan, we need to talk about what's going on here." I clenched my jaw. "What's going on is that I'm tired of being treated like a guest in my own house." Dad's expression hardened. "Watch your tone. This is our house. If you have a problem with how things are run here, you can say so respectfully, or you can leave." For a moment, the whole room went silent. Even Ryan stopped smirking. I swallowed hard. "Maybe I will," I said, my voice low. Mom's eyes widened, like I had just threatened to burn the house down. "Evan, don't be dramatic. You're 18. You don't understand how the world works. You wouldn't last a week out there on your own." That should have scared me. But instead, I felt a strange, almost dizzying calm. I didn't argue with them. I didn't yell. I just quietly gathered my things from the living room and carried them back upstairs. Ryan kept making little comments as I passed. Things like, "Hope you like sleeping on park benches," and "Guess you don't care about family anymore." I ignored him, but each word felt like a push toward the edge of a cliff I'd been teetering on for years. The next day, I came home from school to find something that made my stomach drop even further. My laptop was gone. I tore apart my room looking for it, thinking maybe I'd just misplaced it, but it was nowhere. When I asked Mom, she said, without a hint of guilt, "We took it away. We don't think it's healthy for you to be online so much right now. It's feeding this attitude you've had lately." "That laptop is mine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I paid for it with my job." "Then consider this a cooling off period," Dad said from the kitchen table, sipping his coffee like we were discussing the weather. "You can have it back when we feel you've earned our trust again." I couldn't even speak. My throat felt tight. My ears were ringing. That laptop had everything on it: my schoolwork, my music recordings, even the scholarship essays I'd been working on for next semester. I spent the entire evening in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were closing in. This wasn't just about a canceled birthday anymore. This wasn't about Ryan being spoiled or me being ignored. This was about control, about them taking away the one thing I'd worked for, the one thing that was mine, because they could. Later that night, I heard Ryan laughing in the hallway. He was talking on the phone to one of his friends, bragging. "Yeah, my parents totally busted him. He was planning to move out, but now they've got him on lockdown. He's not going anywhere." That was the moment something in me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just sat up in bed and felt this cold, clear resolve settle over me. If they wanted to keep me trapped, they were about to find out what it was like to have me gone. Not just my presence, but everything I quietly did to keep the house running. The next morning, I started my silent rebellion. I stopped doing the extra chores I usually handled without being asked. No more unloading the dishwasher before school. No more tidying the living room. No more taking out the trash when Ryan forgot. I ate breakfast and left my dishes in the sink like everyone else. Mom noticed first. "Evan, can you clean up the kitchen before you head out?" "I don't have time," I said flatly, grabbing my backpack. Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me. I'm running late. Ryan can do it." Ryan groaned from the couch. "Why me?" "Because I'm not your maid," I said, and walked out the door before they could respond. That week, I started spending more time at my part-time job and less at home. I picked up extra shifts, stayed late, and told my boss I was available on weekends. At first, it was just to get out of the house, but then I realized what I was really doing: saving money. Quietly, steadily, I was building an exit plan. But even as I distanced myself, the situation at home kept deteriorating. One night, I came home after closing at work to find Ryan sitting at the kitchen table, waving my confiscated laptop around like a trophy. "Hey, look who finally came home," he said, grinning. "Mom said I could use this for homework since you don't need it right now." "You what?" I asked, my voice icy. He shrugged. "You weren't using it. Don't worry, I didn't mess with your stuff. Well, not much." He laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I walked straight past him and into my room, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. My heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst. That was the night I decided I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what it meant to lose me. And then, just as I was finalizing my plans to move out quietly, fate handed me the perfect opportunity, one that would make my absence impossible to ignore. The morning after Ryan had paraded my laptop around like a trophy, I woke up with this strange heaviness in my chest. Not anger this time. Something quieter, something hollow. It was like all the fight had drained out of me overnight, leaving just a dull ache. When I came downstairs, Mom was at the stove making pancakes for Ryan, who was sitting at the table in his soccer gear, scrolling on my laptop. "My laptop." "Morning," Mom said brightly, like nothing was wrong. "I made extra if you want some." I just shook my head and grabbed an apple from the counter. "Evan, sit down," Dad said from behind his newspaper. "You barely eat with us anymore." I wanted to tell him that maybe I'd feel like eating breakfast with them if they hadn't turned every meal into another round of Ryan worship hour. But instead, I just said, "I'm not hungry," and walked out the door before either of them could press the issue. At school, I felt like a ghost. I sat through my classes, took notes, answered questions when called on, but I wasn't really there. I kept replaying the image of Ryan's smug grin in my head, over and over, until it made my stomach twist. When I got home that afternoon, my room was a mess. Ryan had apparently decided my closet was fair game now that I wasn't using my stuff anyway. Half my clothes were on the floor, and he'd taken my favorite hoodie. I found him in the living room wearing it. "Take it off," I said, my voice flat. "Relax," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "It looks better on me anyway." Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like the quiet snap of a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long. I didn't yell. I didn't fight him for the hoodie. I just turned around, went upstairs, and shut my door. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hands, staring at the screen. I had been looking at apartment listings in secret for days, but now I opened them again with new urgency. Studio apartments, shared rentals, anything cheap but livable. I called my boss and asked if I could take on full-time hours after graduation. She said yes without hesitation, adding, "You're one of the hardest workers we've got, Evan." It was the first kind word I'd heard in weeks. I started making lists, real lists this time, not just angry scribbles like before. What I would need to buy, what I would take with me, how much money I'd need for first month's rent and a deposit. I counted the cash I'd saved from work and realized I was closer than I thought. But the closer I got to being free, the worse things seemed to get at home. 2 days later, I came home to find that Ryan had been cleaning my room. My drawers were open, my books were stacked wrong, and the few personal things I had left, my journal, my headphones, had been moved. "Why were you in my room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He shrugged. "Mom told me to tidy up since you never do it yourself anymore." "You're welcome." I laughed then, not a happy laugh, but the kind that sounds a little too sharp. "You mean she told you to snoop?" "Congratulations, Ryan. You found my socks. Truly heroic." "Don't be such a drama queen," he said, rolling his eyes. That night, I stayed late at work just to avoid going home. I cleaned up after everyone else had left, organized the shelves, even mopped the floor, anything to stall walking back into that house. When I finally did get home, the lights were off and everyone was asleep. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence, feeling this strange mix of sadness and relief. The next morning, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Evan, we're worried about you. You've been so distant lately." I almost choked on my coffee. "You're worried about me now?" Her eyes narrowed. Don't take that tone with me. You're still living under our roof, and we expect respect. Respect. The word hit me like a slap. I didn't argue. I just walked past her, out the door, and spent the entire day at school thinking about how strange it was that they expected respect, but never gave any back. That weekend, I told my grandparents what had been happening. We met for coffee, just the three of us, and when I told them about the canceled birthday, the confiscated laptop, the invasion of my room, they both went very quiet. Grandpa finally said, "Evan, you don't have to stay there if it's hurting you." "Where would I go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've always been responsible. If you find a place, we'll help you with the deposit. Just say the word." I swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" She smiled sadly. "Sweetheart, you deserve to feel safe where you live. If your parents can't give you that, then it's time to find it for yourself." That night, I went home and started packing in earnest. Not the secret, cautious packing from before, real packing. I put my clothes into bags, wrapped up my books, and quietly moved a few things into the trunk of my car when no one was looking. Each trip felt like a small act of rebellion, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself with every box I carried out. But just when I thought I was finally getting ahead, just when I could almost see the finish line, something happened that made everything 100 times worse and forced me to move faster than I'd ever planned. I woke up the next morning to sunlight spilling across my room, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that usual heaviness pressing down on my chest. Instead, I felt something sharper, determination. Everything in my room was half-packed now, boxes stacked neatly in a corner, bags zipped and ready. If anyone walked in, they'd know exactly what I was planning. But I didn't care anymore. Hiding had gotten me nowhere. Before school, I stopped by the bank to deposit the cash I'd been keeping in a shoebox. My savings account balance had never looked this good, nearly enough for a deposit and first month's rent. Seeing that number on the screen gave me a little surge of power. For so long, I'd felt trapped, dependent, like my parents were holding all the cards. But now I could feel the ground shifting under my feet. I was building my own way out, brick by brick. At school, I stayed late in the library working on my scholarship essays. With my laptop still confiscated, I had to use the school computers, but I didn't care. In fact, staying late meant I didn't have to go home right away. By the end of the week, I had 3 applications finished and submitted. Each one felt like a quiet little victory, a step toward the future I was building that had nothing to do with my parents' approval. My boss noticed my new energy too. One evening after closing, she called me into her office and said, "You've been stepping up a lot lately. I'd like to make you a shift lead." I blinked. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "You've earned it. It comes with a raise. Not huge, but enough to make a difference." I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. It wasn't just about the money, though that helped. It was about someone recognizing my effort, my reliability, things my family had dismissed as just being the easy kid. For once, someone saw me. By the end of the month, I had found a small studio apartment 10 minutes from work. It wasn't much, a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was mine. The landlord was an older guy who seemed kind but businesslike. When I handed him the deposit and first month's rent, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhilaration. That night, I sat in my car outside the apartment building, just staring at the key in my hand. This was it, my ticket out. At home, things were still tense. Ryan had started sulking more now that I wasn't reacting to his provocations. He'd toss my things around, take my charger, hide my shoes, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of blowing up anymore. Every time he tried to get under my skin, I just thought about the key in my pocket and smiled to myself. Mom noticed the change, too. One evening, as I was heading upstairs with a laundry basket, she stopped me at the bottom of the stairs. "You've been very quiet lately," she said cautiously. "I've been busy," I replied, keeping my tone even. She frowned. "Busy with what?" "Work. School. My future." Something flickered across her face then. Confusion? Concern? Maybe even guilt, but she didn't press me further. My grandparents came over that weekend, and this time, I didn't hold back. I showed them pictures of the apartment, told them about my new promotion, even mentioned that I'd been approved for a small scholarship. Grandpa beamed and said, "That's our boy. You're really making something of yourself." It had been so long since I'd felt proud of myself without someone immediately tearing me down. I couldn't stop smiling the rest of the day. The next few days felt almost like living a double life. At school and work, I was this calm, capable version of myself who was steadily building a future. At home, I was quiet, polite, and almost invisible, but only because I wanted to be. Every time I folded another shirt into a box or slid another bag into my car, I felt more in control. I started removing my presence from the house little by little. The photos of me on the fridge disappeared one by one. My shoes were no longer by the front door. My guitar stand was empty. It was like I was slowly erasing myself from their world, preparing them for what was coming without them even realizing it. Then came the day I got my laptop back. It happened casually, almost anticlimactically. I came home from work and found it sitting on my bed with a sticky note that said, "We trust you again." I stared at it for a long time, then laughed, an actual laugh this time, not bitter or angry. I didn't need their permission anymore. I had already built a life outside of their control, and no one could take that from me. That night, I used the laptop to make a checklist of the final things I needed. A couple of pieces of furniture, cleaning supplies, groceries for the new place. I ordered most of it online and had it shipped directly to the apartment. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was ready. My car was packed full, my savings were enough to cover at least 2 months of expenses, and my apartment key was warm in my pocket. But before I could make my quiet exit, before I could slip away without a scene, something happened that accelerated everything and turned my quiet departure into something much bigger than I'd ever imagined. 2 days before I planned to move out, I came home early from work and walked into the house just in time to overhear a conversation that changed everything. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen talking in low voices, and Ryan was sitting at the counter eating cereal. I was about to slip past and head upstairs when I caught my own name. "He's been pulling away for months," Mom was saying. "I don't understand what we did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," Dad replied, his tone dismissive. "He's just going through a phase. Once he sees how hard it is out there, he'll come crawling back. He doesn't realize how much he relies on us." Ryan snorted. "Yeah, good luck to him. He can't even keep his room clean. He'll be back in a week." I froze in the hallway. They weren't worried. They were waiting for me to fail. They thought my independence was some kind of rebellion, a tantrum like Ryan's but quieter. They weren't scared to lose me. They were convinced I'd be back begging them for help. For a long moment, I just stood there, heart pounding, a cold clarity washing over me. This wasn't just about getting out anymore. It was about proving them wrong, about making sure they understood that I could survive, even thrive, without them. That night, I sat in my room with my laptop open, staring at the glowing screen and thinking. I wasn't just going to leave quietly. I was going to make sure they felt the weight of me being gone, not in a vindictive way, but in a way that made them realize what they had taken for granted. I started with the practical things. I gathered every bill, subscription, and account that had my name on it. The internet plan, the streaming services, even the shared family cloud storage that I had been paying for since I got my job sophomore year. One by one, I changed the payment methods or canceled them outright. If I was leaving, I wasn't going to keep footing the bill for a house that no longer felt like mine. Then I moved on to my responsibilities around the house. I'd always been the one to quietly fix things, replace light bulbs, unclog the sink, keep the fridge organized. I made a mental list of all the little tasks no one noticed until they weren't done. It wasn't petty, it was practical. If they were so sure I'd be back, they were about to get a taste of what it was like without me there to keep things running smoothly. I also started talking to my grandparents more. They were still quietly supportive, though I could tell they were trying not to take sides. One afternoon, Grandma slipped me an envelope with a few $100s in it. "Consider it a little cushion," she said softly, "just until you get settled." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you. I promise I won't waste it." She smiled. "You've never wasted anything, Evan. That's why we know you're going to be okay." That night, I went to the apartment after work to drop off the last of my boxes. It felt surreal, standing in the middle of that empty space, imagining how it would look once I brought in the rest of my things. For the first time, I let myself really picture it. Coming home to a place that was mine, eating dinner without being interrupted, playing my guitar without Ryan pounding on the wall. But as much as I wanted to just stay there right then, I knew I had one last thing to do before I left. One last piece to put into place that would make this exit unforgettable. The final push came from Ryan himself. ironically enough. The night before I planned to move out, I came home to find him in my room again, this time sitting on my bed and scrolling through my phone. I didn't even bother asking why. I just held out my hand and said, "Give it back." He smirked but handed it over. "You really should put a passcode on that thing if you don't want people going through it." "I did," I said flatly. "You guessed it." He laughed. "What, your birthday?" Too easy. Something about the way he said it, like my birthday was a joke, like he had beaten me at some game, made my stomach clench. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about showing all of them that I wasn't someone they could control or dismiss whenever it was convenient. After dinner, I locked my door and spent the rest of the night making sure everything was ready. My car was already packed except for the essentials I'd need in the morning. I double-checked the cancellations, the payments, the address changes. I even scheduled the internet service to end the day after I left, just to make sure the house wouldn't go dark until I was safely gone. And then I did something I'd been debating for days. I wrote a letter. It wasn't angry or dramatic. No yelling in all caps, no accusations. Just a clear, calm explanation of why I was leaving, how I felt, and what I needed. I told them I wasn't running away. I wasn't punishing them. I was choosing myself for once. When I finished, I set it on my desk where they'd find it after I was gone. Then I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the house. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped by it. I felt ready. Tomorrow, I would leave. And when they woke up, they'd finally see what it looked like when I wasn't there to hold everything together. The morning I left, the house was still quiet when I woke up. Sunlight was just beginning to creep across my floor, lighting up the stacks of boxes that were no longer hidden, but standing out in the open like silent witnesses. I dressed quietly, packed the last few items into my backpack, my journal, my headphones, the letter, and took one last look around my room. It didn't feel like my room anymore. The posters were gone, the shelves were bare, the space almost echoed. For the first time, instead of sadness, I felt relief. Downstairs, I could hear the faint sounds of Mom clattering around in the kitchen. Ryan was still asleep. I could tell from the silence, and Dad hadn't left for work yet. My heart was beating fast, but I moved with a kind of calm focus, the way you do when you've rehearsed something over and over in your head. I set the letter neatly on my desk where they couldn't miss it, then grabbed my guitar case and my backpack. Each step down the stairs felt heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was finally doing. Before I left, I did the last few things on my mental checklist. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router and tucked it under my arm. It was in my name, after all, and I had every right to take it. Then I grabbed the small basket by the front door where we kept spare house keys. I took mine off the ring and set it on top with a quiet little click. When I stepped outside, the early morning air hit me like a shock. My car was packed full, boxes, bags, a few pieces of furniture I'd managed to fit in the back seat. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and for a moment just sat there, staring at the house. No big dramatic goodbye. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just me, finally choosing to leave. By the time everyone woke up, I was already at my new apartment unloading the car. I spent the entire morning moving in, arranging my few belongings, making the space feel like mine. The silence was different here, not tense or heavy, just quiet, peaceful. Around noon, my phone started blowing up. First it was Mom. "Evan, where are you? Why is your room empty?" Then Dad. "Call us right now. This is unacceptable." Then Ryan, of all people. "Dude." Mom is freaking out. Dad's yelling. "What did you do?" I ignored all of them until I had finished setting up the Wi-Fi in my apartment. Then, when I was finally sitting on my little secondhand couch with my laptop on my knees, I texted back a single line. "Check the letter." It didn't take long for the next call to come in. This time it was Dad again, but I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, almost panicked. "Evan, we read your note. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. Call us back." I didn't call. By evening, the messages had gone from angry to pleading. Mom wrote, "We didn't realize you felt this way. Please come home so we can talk." I sat back against the couch and let out a slow breath. For the first time, they weren't dismissing my feelings, weren't telling me to be the mature one. For the first time, they sounded like they actually saw me. That weekend, the real fallout began. I heard from my grandparents that Mom and Dad had been scrambling to figure out how to pay for the bills I'd been covering. The internet was shut off for a full day before they could get it switched into their names. Ryan had a meltdown when he couldn't play video games, which apparently set off another round of shouting matches between everyone. Part of me almost felt guilty hearing about the chaos. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I'd been told to just let it go. All the times my own needs had been brushed aside for Ryan's comfort, and the guilt faded. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. But I didn't rush to fix things for them, either. Every time I was tempted to step in and smooth things over like I always had, I reminded myself, this was exactly what they needed to feel. Meanwhile, my own life was finally starting to take shape. I bought a small second-hand table for my kitchen, a thrift store lamp for the corner of the living room. Each little addition made the apartment feel more like home. I started sleeping better than I had in months, waking up without that knot of dread in my stomach. At work, my boss pulled me aside and told me she'd put me on the schedule for more closing shifts since I was so reliable. The extra money meant I could start saving faster. And for once, every cent I earned went to my own future, not to keeping the household running for everyone else. Ryan tried calling me a few times, first to taunt me, bet you're miserable out there, and then to complain, Mom is making me do your chores now. Thanks a lot. I didn't respond to either. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I signed up for an extra night class to get ahead on my college credits. I started playing my guitar again, something I hadn't done in weeks because every time I picked it up at home, Ryan would bang on the wall and yell at me to stop. Now I could play as loud as I wanted, as late as I wanted, and no one said a word. The night I finally strung up a few posters on the wall and sat cross-legged on the floor eating takeout, I realized I was smiling. A real smile this time, not the tight, polite kind I'd worn at home, but the kind that came from somewhere deep, somewhere free. And then, just as I was settling into this new rhythm, just as I was starting to feel like I'd finally taken back control of my life, something happened that brought all the simmering tension with my family to a boil and forced them to face the consequences of what they'd done to drive me away. The fallout came faster and harder than I ever expected. A few days after I'd settled into my apartment, my grandparents called me. Grandpa's voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "Well, you certainly shook things up over there," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "They've been fighting nonstop," Grandma chimed in. "Your mom's been crying, your dad's been pacing, and Ryan, well, apparently he's not taking the loss of Wi-Fi very gracefully." I almost laughed. For years, every family argument had somehow been about keeping Ryan calm, keeping Ryan happy. And now they were finally seeing what happened when the one person who kept everything quietly running, me, stepped away. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. It was Mom. This time, I answered. "Evan," she said, her voice tired. "Can we please talk? We need to see you." "I'm listening," I said carefully. We didn't realize you felt so neglected. We thought you were okay. You never complained." I took a long breath before answering. "That was the problem, Mom. I kept quiet because every time I tried to speak up, I was told to be the mature one. My needs never came first. They barely came second. You canceled my 18th birthday to avoid upsetting Ryan. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her inhale shakily. "I do now," she admitted. "Your dad and we didn't handle that right. We let Ryan run the house because it was easier than fighting him. But losing you like this, it's not what we wanted." For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered all those nights I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, wondering why no one seemed to care about me, why I always had to be the one to sacrifice. "I'm not coming back," I said gently but firmly. "I'm happy here. I feel like myself here. If you want to see me, you can visit, but this is my home now." She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay," in a small voice, and we hung up. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Dad called me once, not to lecture me, but to apologize. It was awkward. He stumbled over his words, like he wasn't sure how to say them, but I could tell he meant it. "We should have celebrated your birthday, son. We should have made you feel valued." I'm sorry. That apology landed heavier than I expected. For years, I'd been waiting to hear those words. Ryan didn't call, but I heard through the grapevine that his attitude had started to backfire now that he didn't have me to blame for everything. Mom and Dad had finally started making him do his own chores, pay for some of his own things, and face consequences when he messed up. Apparently, he hated it. Meanwhile, My life was only getting better. My raise kicked in, and for the first time, I had money left over at the end of the month. I started cooking for myself, badly at first, but I got better, and my tiny apartment began to feel like a sanctuary. The peace was addictive. No slammed doors. No shouting matches. No walking on eggshells every time Ryan was in a bad mood. One Saturday morning, a few months later, I invited my grandparents over for breakfast. We sat at my thrifted kitchen table drinking coffee and laughing, and when they left, Grandma hugged me tight and whispered, "You've built something good here. We're proud of you." After they left, I sat on the couch with my guitar in my lap, strumming lazily, and I thought about how far I'd come. The house I grew up in was still standing, but I wasn't a piece of it anymore. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. The final moment of closure came on my 19th birthday. I didn't expect anything, but that morning, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Mom and Dad were standing there, awkward but sincere, holding a small cake with a single candle. "We'd like to try again," Mom said softly, "if you'll let us." I hesitated for a long moment before stepping aside and letting them in. We sat at my little table, and they sang to me, off-key, slightly embarrassed, but genuine. As I blew out the candle, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making them feel guilty. It was about finally being seen, finally being heard. And they were hearing me now, in a way they never had before. When they left, Mom hugged me tight and whispered, "Happy birthday, Evan. Thank you for not giving up on us." I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, and smiled. They had learned what life was like without me, and they had come back ready to do better. And I had learned that my voice mattered, that my life could be my own, no matter what house I lived in. As I sat back down with the last slice of cake and picked up my guitar, I thought to myself, this was the best birthday I'd ever had. Because this time, it was mine. My name's Ryan, and I'm 33 years old. Christmas used to be my favorite time of the year. Lights on the porch, cinnamon in the air, and for a few hours, the world felt softer. Or at least it used to. Things started shifting in my family about 3 years ago, but last Christmas was when the dam finally broke. And yeah, it broke right over my head. I pulled into the driveway just before 6, a little nervous but hopeful. I had a wrapped bottle of wine under one arm. Something nice, something aged, not the grocery store kind, and a batch of homemade cookies I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. baking. I even wore the red sweater my mom used to love, the one she said made me look like someone who'd host a Hallmark special. It was supposed to be a warm gesture. A peace offering, maybe. I hadn't been around as much the past couple years, not since Mom passed, and truth be told, things with the family had gotten tense. My sister, Melanie, blamed me for not coming to visit enough. My Aunt Doreen always had a bone to pick, usually about how I thought I was better than the rest of us since I moved out of town for work. But I figured, Christmas is Christmas. We could all set our egos aside for one night, right? Apparently not. I rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass, I saw movement, shadows, laughter. Someone peeked through the curtains and then quickly shut them again. A second later, the door swung open. There stood Aunt Doreen in all her passive-aggressive glory, glittery reindeer sweater, wine glass in hand, and that unmistakable look of disdain she reserved just for me. "Oh," she said flatly, not even trying to hide her annoyance. "You actually showed up." I gave her a polite smile. "Merry Christmas, Aunt D." She looked over her shoulder, then back at me with a sigh like I'd tracked mud across her white carpet. "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." Her voice was low, but sharp, like a whisper that still managed to cut through bone. I blinked. "What?" She leaned in closer, her expression not changing. "This is a family gathering. You made it pretty clear the last few years that you're not part of this family anymore." I tried to peer past her, into the living room. There they were, my cousins, my uncles, even my dad. They were all sitting around the long table, golden and warm under the chandelier. Melanie was pouring gravy onto her plate, laughing at something Uncle Joe said. Dad was carving the turkey like nothing was wrong. No one had looked up. No one had come to greet me. They all knew I was out here. I don't know how long I stood there, stunned. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but all that came out was a short breath. "I see," I said finally. And I meant it. I saw everything. I turned, walked down the steps, and didn't look back. My cookies slipped a little in the tray, but I steadied them. I didn't run, didn't slam the gate. Just walked back to my car, as the snow started falling in fat, wet flakes. The kind that melted instantly but still carried that quiet hush, like the world itself was holding its breath. I sat in the car for a second, gripping the steering wheel. It wasn't anger yet. Not sadness, either. Just a kind of hollow weight in my chest. I'd driven 2 hours. I'd rehearsed what I'd say to Dad. I even brought a gift for Melanie's newborn, even though she never responded to my message when I congratulated her. It would have been easy to cry, easier still to rage. But I didn't do either. I just whispered, "Got it," and started the engine. I was barely 5 minutes down the road when my phone started buzzing. First one call, then another. I ignored them, let them go to voicemail. I didn't want to hear it. Whatever excuse, whatever lie, none of it would change the look on Doreen's face when she said what she said. None of it would erase the image of my whole family, gathered in the warm glow, acting like I never existed. Then came the 10th call, Dad. I finally answered, if only out of morbid curiosity. Ryan. His voice was shaky. There was noise in the background, doors slamming, voices raised. Yeah, I said calmly. Where are you? On my way home. What? He didn't answer right away. I could hear Melanie in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. Then, muffled, he's not picking up, Dad. Just let it go. But Dad didn't let it go. Turn around. Please. Something's happened. Something's happened. I repeated slowly. What exactly? Did the turkey dry out? He ignored the jab. Ryan, just come back. Please. You need to come back. I almost laughed. You need me to come back now? After your sister told me to ruin someone else's holiday. Dad exhaled heavily, like he was wrestling with himself. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she said that. I didn't even know you were at the door until 10 minutes ago. There was a thud, like he was moving fast, maybe grabbing a coat. I heard wind. Then footsteps. Where are you now? He asked. About 10 minutes away. What? I'm coming to get you, he said. Just stay where you are. Please, Ryan. Don't hang up. I didn't answer right away. Then I saw headlights behind me in the rearview mirror. Someone had pulled out of the driveway in a rush. That's when I realized my dad had left. He'd physically left the house on Christmas night. I'd never seen him do that. Not once. He was the guy who carved the turkey, passed the rolls, gave the toasts. The centerpiece of the whole thing. Ryan, he said again, breathless now. Wait for me. And just like that, the hollow in my chest started to twist. Not into hope. No, not yet. But into something else. Because I suddenly had a feeling that whatever came next, it wasn't going to be quiet. Or easy. And what he was about to tell me, that was going to change everything. I pulled into a gas station parking lot about a mile down the road. The place was mostly dark, just the flickering buzz of one overhead light and the glowing red numbers of a lottery sign that hadn't been updated since Halloween. I parked near the edge, right beside an old dumpster, and cut the engine. Snow was settling on the windshield, forming delicate outlines like frostbite lace. I didn't turn on the heat. A minute later, a car swerved into the lot. My dad's silver Subaru. It screeched slightly as it came to a stop beside me. The door flew open, and there he was, jacket barely zipped, one glove on, the other clenched in his fist. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there outside my car, chest heaving. His face was red from the cold, or maybe something else. He looked older, smaller, somehow, under the parking lot lights. I cracked my window. You okay? He nodded, then gestured frantically. Get out. Please. I need to talk to you. Not through glass. I hesitated, but finally stepped out. The wind bit hard. Snow stuck in my hair, melted on my neck. He looked at me like he hadn't seen me in years. And maybe, in a way, he hadn't. She told you we didn't want you there? He asked. His voice was tight, controlled fury, like every word was holding back a wave. She said to go ruin someone else's holiday, I replied. He flinched, just barely. That wasn't us. That wasn't me. I didn't even know you were at the door. I was carving the stupid turkey when Melanie leaned over and whispered, Don't worry, Aunt Doreen handled Ryan. I didn't understand what she meant until it clicked, until I saw the empty seat at the end of the table. I crossed my arms. Handled, huh? He looked sick. Ryan, you have to understand. Ever since your mom passed, Doreen's wormed her way into everything. Holidays. Decisions. She's got this twisted idea that Melanie's the golden child, and you. The embarrassment, I finished for him. Dad didn't argue, which was almost worse. I should have stopped it years ago, he muttered. After your mom died, I let people fill the silence. Doreen filled it the loudest. I could see it in his face. The guilt, the regret. But it didn't erase the years I'd sat alone on Christmas mornings. The birthdays they forgot. The family group chats I was quietly removed from. Why now? I asked. Why chase after me this time? He swallowed. Hard. Because it's gone too far. And because, he paused, suddenly unsure. Because I found something in the kitchen drawer tonight. After you left. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Carefully, like it was sacred. I took it with numb fingers. It was a letter. From my mother. To my son, Ryan. I blinked, eyes suddenly stinging. She wrote it before she died, Dad said quietly. She left it for you. But Melanie and Doreen, his jaw tightened. They must have hidden it. I had no idea until tonight. I was looking for matches to light the extra candles, and there it was. I unfolded it with trembling hands. I won't copy it word for word here. That feels too personal. But in short, it was everything I'd needed to hear. That she was proud of me. That she knew how the others treated me, especially Doreen. That I shouldn't let them make me feel small. That her last Christmas wish was for Dad and me to stay close. That I was not the disappointment they made me out to be. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at the ink. My dad's voice cut through the silence. She didn't want this family to become what it has. I didn't protect you from it. But I can now. Something shifted in me. Slowly, painfully, like a knot that had been tangled for years finally loosening. She left this for me. I murmured. And they buried it. He nodded. Doreen knew what it would do. That's why she kept it from you. I clenched the paper in my fist. And Melanie? He hesitated. She let it happen. She's been listening to Doreen for too long. Of course she had. The favoritism was never subtle. Ever since we were kids, Melanie could do no wrong. And I was the one who wasted potential by choosing art school over law, who didn't rush to get married, who moved out of state. It always baffled me how a family that preached love could be so quick to turn cold when you didn't match the picture frame. My jaw tightened. I need to know the truth. All of it. My dad hesitated, then nodded once. Then come back. Just for a moment. Not to celebrate. To confront. I stared at him. You're asking me to walk back into that house. I'm asking you to let them see what they tried to erase. I didn't answer right away, but I started walking. Back to the car. Back toward the house that had tried so hard to forget me. And in my pocket, I clutched the one thing they couldn't destroy, Mom's words. Her truth. 10 minutes later, we were pulling into the driveway again. Lights still twinkled from the bushes, and the warmth of the house glowed through the windows like a stage set waiting for its final act. But this time, I wasn't standing at the door hoping to be accepted. This time, I was bringing the curtain down. And what happened when I walked through that door? Well, they weren't laughing anymore. The front door creaked open before I even reached it. My dad must have texted someone, because Aunt Doreen was already standing in the hallway, lips pursed and arms folded like I'd shown up uninvited to a funeral. Well, she said, look who's back. I stepped past her without a word. The smell of honeyed ham and baked yams clung to the air, mixing with the low buzz of awkward silence. Every eye in the dining room turned to me as I walked in. Melanie's hand froze mid-bite. Uncle Joe stopped sipping his wine, and even the dog stopped chewing whatever scrap it had stolen under the table. No one said anything. The room held its breath. I looked around the table, letting the silence stretch, letting them stew in it. Then I held up the letter. This, I said slowly, was buried in a drawer. Hidden. Doreen shifted in the hallway, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. That's private. You had no right. No. I cut in sharply. You had no right. She wrote this to me. Her son. Not to you. Not to Melanie. To me. And you kept it from me. Melanie stood up, half defiant, half uncomfortable. Ryan, you don't even know the full story. That letter, Mom was sick when she wrote it. She wasn't thinking straight. I turned to face her fully. She was thinking clearly enough to say I was being shut out. That you were letting Doreen treat me like a mistake. That Dad needed to step up, and so did you. Her eyes darted toward Dad, who stood silently by the doorway. When she realized he wasn't going to save her, her voice rose just a little. You left. You moved away and ghosted us. I didn't ghost you, I said, my voice low and firm. You shut the door. Repeatedly. I came to Mom's bedside and was told not to stress her out. I messaged you on her birthday. I called you when Dad had that fall. Every time, It was a brick wall. And when I did show up, you made me feel like I didn't belong. Because you never stayed, Melanie shot back, her tone laced with old resentment. You always ran off to your little artsy city life and left the rest of us here to deal with everything. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You mean you and Doreen? You two practically pushed me out. Every time I tried to reconnect, it was like showing up to a party no one wanted me at. That's when Aunt Doreen spoke again, stepping fully into the room now, her eyes cold and narrowing. Maybe that's because every time you come back, you bring drama. We've done just fine without you. Right? I said, nodding. Which is exactly why you made sure this letter never reached me. Because deep down, you knew the truth. You knew she didn't agree with how you've been running this family. She saw you for what you are. Doreen's jaw clenched. That letter doesn't change reality. We had to keep things together after your mother passed. We needed order. You mean control, Dad said quietly, his first word since we entered. Doreen looked at him, stunned. Excuse me. Dad stepped forward, his voice firm. You took control, Doreen. I let you. That's on me. But hiding that letter? That's on you. The table was dead silent now. My cousins looked around nervously, shifting in their seats. The baby in the bassinet let out a soft coo, the only innocent sound in the whole house. Melanie sat back down slowly, as if her legs had given out. So what do you want, Ryan? You came back just to make a scene. I tilted my head. No. I came back because my dad deserved to hear what his wife wanted. And because I deserved to hear what my mother said to me before she died. I took a step toward the table and gently placed the letter in the center, next to the cranberry sauce no one had touched. And now, I want the truth out there. I want you all to sit with the fact that you tried to erase me from my own family's story. And I want you, Melanie, to look me in the eye and admit that you let it happen. Melanie didn't look up. Her mouth moved like she had something to say, but no words came out. I turned to leave. I wasn't here to beg for forgiveness or to listen to excuses. But just as I reached the threshold, I heard a voice behind me. Wait, Dad said. Before you go. He walked over to the table, picked up his wine glass, and raised it slightly. I think there's one more toast we need to make. I didn't turn around, but I could feel every eye shifting toward him. To my son, he said, loud and clear. The one person in this room who didn't pretend everything was fine while letting rot fester under the tablecloth. To the only one here who still knows what family should mean. He set the glass down. No one clapped. No one echoed the toast. I walked back into the snow, the door closing behind me with a soft click. And this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt something else. A storm brewing. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. Instead, I booked a room at a small inn near the lake I used to visit with Mom when I was younger. It was the only place still open on Christmas night, and the woman at the front desk didn't ask any questions. Just handed me a key with a soft smile and told me the heater worked well. I thanked her and went to my room, where I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, the silence finally catching up with me. I stared at the letter again, ran my fingers over the words. Every time I read it, I found something new in it, another bit of her voice, her rhythm, her care. She'd ended the letter with, "Don't let them silence you. Not again. The world will try to make you small, but I raised you to know better. I love you. Always. Mom." I sat there for a long time just thinking. The next morning, I took a walk by the frozen lake. The sky was a dull silver, and the air carried that sharp, clean bite of midwinter. My phone buzzed with missed calls, texts, voicemails. Melanie had finally broken her silence. Messages ranging from, "We need to talk," to "You really embarrassed the whole family." I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed to do this my way. When I got back to the inn, I sat down at the little wooden desk by the window, opened my laptop, and started writing. The letter was the first thing I scanned. Then, I wrote a statement to go along with it. Nothing bitter. Nothing exaggerated. Just facts. The truth. I posted it online, on my private blog that Mom used to follow, and then I emailed the link to every single person who sat at that Christmas table. And then, I waited. The fallout started about 4 hours later. The first person to reach out was my cousin Liam. He wasn't someone I was ever close with, but he'd always been decent to me in that vague, "I'm staying out of it" kind of way. His message was short. "Ryan, I didn't know. I'm sorry. That letter broke me. I should have stood up for you. We all should have." It was the first apology I'd received from anyone in years. The second message came from Aunt Doreen. Unlike Liam's, Hers was venom disguised as concern. You're making a mistake airing dirty laundry like this. Family matters should stay private. Do you really want to cause a rift that can't be healed? I read it, then deleted it. Because the rift wasn't caused by me. It was caused by every slammed door, every withheld invitation, every whisper behind my back. I wasn't creating a divide. I was acknowledging the one that had been there all along. By that evening, Melanie called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was cautious, not angry yet. Ryan, look, I saw what you posted. That letter. I didn't read the whole thing, but what? I asked. I think we should talk. In person, not online. This is a family matter. You had years to talk, I said. You had opportunities to call me, invite me to birthdays, thank me for the gifts I sent. You didn't. You buried the one thing Mom left me. And now that people are finally seeing who you are, now you want to talk. There was silence on the other end. You really want to fix this? I asked. Then tell the truth. Publicly. Own it. Own what you and Doreen did. I can't just. You know how this looks, Ryan. Everyone's judging us now. Good, I said flatly. Maybe now you'll understand how I felt every holiday when you all made me feel like a stranger. She didn't call back after that, but others did. More than I expected. My mom's old friend, Clara, messaged me. She hadn't spoken to our family in years. She said the letter moved her to tears, that my mom had always worried about how Doreen treated me, even before she got sick. Apparently, she had begged Clara to stay close to me after her death. But Doreen had intercepted that, too. Told Clara I wanted space. Told everyone I wanted space. They'd rewritten the narrative, and I'd let them, because I didn't know. Until now. A few days later, I returned to the house. Not for Christmas. Not to reconcile. I came with a purpose. Dad met me at the front steps. He looked tired. Tired, but clear-headed, like a man who'd finally opened his eyes after a long sleep. They're inside, he said. Melanie, Doreen. Everyone else left. I nodded. Let's do this. We walked in together. Doreen was pacing the living room, a drink in her hand, like she'd been rehearsing some big speech. Melanie sat rigid on the couch, eyes red from either stress or frustration. I didn't give them a chance to start. I'm taking legal steps, I said. I talked to a lawyer. What you did, hiding my mother's letter, manipulating her communication, possibly intercepting personal mail, it may not be criminal, but it's unethical, and it is grounds for cutting you out of any say in family decisions going forward. Doreen blinked, then laughed once. Family decisions? You're barely part of this family. That's funny, I said, because I just reconnected with 10 relatives who think otherwise, including Aunt Celeste. You remember her? She's flying out next month to see me. First time in 10 years. Apparently, she thought I cut her off. Wonder where she got that idea. Melanie looked away. Dad stepped forward. Things are going to change, starting now. Ryan's letter from his mother should have been given to him immediately. The fact that you both kept it from him, after everything, means you've lost my trust. Charles, be reasonable, Doreen said. He shook his head. No, you manipulated us. You convinced me that my son didn't care, that he was distant by choice. I let you fill that void after we lost her, and I regret it every day. He turned to me. I'm rewriting the will. Effective immediately. Melanie's head snapped up. What? I don't trust you with anything related to this family's legacy anymore, he said, voice cold. Ryan's the one who honored your mother's memory. He's the one who told the truth. Doreen sputtered. You're letting one letter undo everything? No, I said. You did that. I handed her a copy of the letter. Read it. Really read it. Then ask yourself how someone could ever justify hiding it. I didn't stay for the rest. I walked out of that house for the last time with my head high, the wind crisp against my face, and the sun finally starting to peek out from behind the gray. Weeks passed. True to his word, Dad rewrote the will. We started meeting every Sunday, just the two of us. Slowly, we began repairing the bond that had been strained for far too long. He even came with me to the lake one afternoon in February. We talked about Mom, about who she really was, not the edited version that Doreen had filtered over the years. As for Melanie and Doreen, they tried damage control, a few weak attempts at reconciliation, a public post from Melanie about forgiveness that didn't mention my name once. But most people saw through it, and I didn't care, because I finally understood something. Family isn't about blood. It's not about who shows up to dinner or shares your last name. It's about who stands beside you when the truth comes out. And thanks to that letter, my mother's final gift, I found my voice again. They tried to lock the door on me, but I walked through it anyway. And this time, I made sure it slammed shut behind me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The day I turned 18, I was met with a duffel bag and a cold stare from my father instead of a birthday cake. No candles, no dinner, not even a card. Just him standing by the front door, arms crossed, saying, "You're an adult now, figure it out," like he was quoting a movie line. My mom was behind him, silent, eyes fixed on the floor. I remember asking if this was a joke, my voice cracking like I was still 14, not technically a legal adult. But he didn't blink, just pointed to the bag, already packed, and said I had 10 minutes before he changed the locks. That was how I left home. Not with a celebration, but with a cheap gym bag, $60 in my pocket, and no clue where I'd sleep that night. My name's Alex, and at the time, I had just graduated high school 3 days prior. I wasn't some rebellious teen. I wasn't getting into trouble. No drugs, no skipping class, no fighting. I had a part-time job at the local gas station, a 3.7 GPA, and a dream of maybe getting into community college if I could afford it. But none of that seemed to matter. The truth is, I'd always known I was the spare. My younger brother, Nathan, was the golden child. Even as a kid, I used to joke that he must have had a halo tucked somewhere in his closet. Straight A's? Sure, but so did I. But when he did it, it was brilliant. When I did, it was expected. He'd crash my bike and get a replacement the next day. I'd break a shoelace and get blamed for not taking care of my things. Nathan was 2 years younger, but they treated him like the heir to a throne I didn't know existed. He got braces and tennis lessons. I got used sneakers and silence. Every time I asked why things were so different between us, my dad would say, "Don't be dramatic, Alex. Life's not fair." And that was the end of the conversation. Always. I learned early not to push too hard. So, I kept my head down, worked my shifts, did my homework, and told myself that once I turned 18, I'd leave on my own terms. But I guess they beat me to it. The first week out of that house was brutal. I couch hopped with friends until one of their parents got uncomfortable. I slept in the break room at work one night when it was raining too hard to walk the streets. Eventually, I found a dingy room in a shared house with 3 strangers, one of whom sold weed out of the living room, another who blasted music at 3 a.m., and the third who barely spoke English but always smiled and offered me instant noodles. That man, Chun, was more family than my parents had ever been. It took me 4 years to get on my feet. I worked every job I could: cashier, delivery driver, late-night janitor at a mall where the air always smelled like expired popcorn. I studied on breaks, took online classes, and eventually earned a degree in IT. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No help from my parents, no trust fund, no secret savings account. Just me, a busted laptop, and sheer stubbornness. By the time I hit 26, I was living in a clean 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I had a car that ran, a job that paid well, and, for the first time in my life, a sense of peace. Not happiness exactly. That came later. But peace. I didn't think about my family much. I didn't visit. Didn't call. I wasn't bitter, at least not consciously. I just figured, if I wasn't good enough for them then, I sure as hell wasn't going to beg now. And then, one Sunday morning, everything shifted again. It started with a knock. I was in sweats, just about to start some laundry, when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks, too firm to be friendly. I peeked through the peephole and froze. My mom. Behind her, slightly out of view, was my dad, arms crossed in that same posture I remembered from the day they kicked me out. My first thought wasn't, why are they here? It was, how do they even know where I live? I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "Alex," my mom started, all breathy and wide-eyed like this was some long-lost reunion. "You look grown." "I am grown," I replied flatly. "What do you want?" My dad cut in, "No small talk. We need to talk. Can we come in?" I stared at them for a long second. I didn't say yes. I just stepped aside. They sat on my couch like it was theirs. My mom looked around like she was inspecting the place for dust. My dad remained standing, hands on his hips. The silence was thick. "We've had a rough few years," my mom finally said, clasping her hands in her lap. "And your brother? Well, he's in a bit of a bind." I felt something cold twist in my stomach. Of course, this was about Nathan. What kind of bind? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He got laid off, she said gently, like I was supposed to feel sorry. And his fiancée left him. Took the car. He's struggling. I waited. We thought, my dad said, that since you're doing well now, and since you have this place, maybe it's time to come together. As a family. I raised an eyebrow. Come together how? My mom glanced at my dad before answering. We think it would make sense for Nathan to move in here. Just temporarily. Until he gets back on his feet. There was a moment of stunned silence. I almost laughed. Almost. You're joking, I said. No, my dad replied firmly. You've got space. It's the least you can do. Family comes first. Those 3 words made something snap in me. Family comes first. The same family that tossed me out like garbage. The same family that let me go hungry while they remodeled Nathan's room into a study space after I left. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, trying not to raise my voice. You threw me out on my 18th birthday with no warning, no support, and now you're asking me to house Nathan? Because family comes first? My mom looked uncomfortable. We made mistakes. Mistakes. I interrupted. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Alex, my dad said, stepping forward like he was still in control of this situation. He's your brother. He needs you. You don't turn your back on family. I stood up. You did. The room went quiet again. Look, my mom tried to soften her tone. He's been through a lot. He's not like you. He doesn't handle hardship well. He's always been sensitive. And I wasn't. I said, incredulous. I just didn't have the luxury of falling apart. It was clear they weren't getting it. Or didn't want to. My dad kept pressing, tossing out reasons, guilt, comparisons. He even said something about how I'd built this life off the back of their tough love. I almost choked. That wasn't tough love. That was abandonment, plain and simple. They left that day without an answer. But I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it in my gut. They weren't going to let this go. Not with Nathan in the picture. And I had no idea just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. But I was no longer the scared 18-year-old they left behind. And this time, I had something to lose and something to protect. I didn't know it yet, but the storm was just beginning. They didn't call for a few days after that visit. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd taken the hint and backed off. I even started to let it go, convincing myself that their ridiculous request was just a one-time shot at manipulation. But by the following weekend, I knew I'd underestimated them. It started with a voicemail from Nathan. I hadn't heard his voice in years, and I barely recognized it at first. He sounded tired, scratchy, and oddly rehearsed, like he was trying to sound pitiful on purpose. Hey, Alex. Mom and Dad told me they came to see you. I know it's a lot to ask, man, but I'm kinda out of options right now. I lost my job and my place, and I've been crashing at a friend's, but it's not working out. I could use your help. Just until I get back on my feet. Please call me. I didn't call him back. That wasn't me being cold-hearted. That was self-preservation. I knew how this would go. Nathan had always been able to coast on his charm. He had this disarming way of acting helpless, like he was a puppy who'd wandered into traffic. And people, especially our parents, would rush to save him. But not me. Not this time. I had scars they never even noticed, and I wasn't going to pretend they didn't exist just because Nathan was finally dealing with the consequences of his own life choices. Still, that voicemail started gnawing at me. Not guilt, more like dread. Because if Nathan was reaching out, that meant my parents had activated the next phase of their plan. And I wasn't wrong. 3 days later, I came home from work and found my dad's car parked outside my apartment building. My stomach sank. He was standing by the door, arms crossed. Same posture, same scowl. When I approached, he didn't move. Just said, "We need to talk." I didn't bother inviting him in. "We've been patient," he said, like I was a rebellious child refusing to eat my vegetables. "But you're being selfish." I laughed. I actually laughed. Selfish? You think I'm being selfish? You've got a stable life now. Nathan doesn't. You don't think your brother deserves a chance to? What he deserves, I said, has nothing to do with me. He stepped closer. You're part of this family whether you like it or not. No, I replied, staring him down. You made sure I wasn't. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of anger in his eyes, not rage, but something worse. Entitlement. Like he believed, deep down, that everything I had was somehow his to bargain with. He didn't yell. He just said, "You'll regret this," and walked off. 2 days after that, I started getting unexpected texts from extended family, cousins, an aunt I hadn't heard from in years, even a random Facebook message from someone who claimed to be a family friend. All of them saying some version of the same thing. It's not right to turn your back on family. Nathan's struggling. He needs support. You're doing well. Can't you help just a little? One cousin even said, "Wow, didn't realize success made you so heartless." It was coordinated. My parents had clearly spun a story, probably one where I was living like royalty in a mansion while poor Nathan was sleeping in gutters. The irony was, my apartment was modest at best. But that didn't matter. The narrative had been set, and I was now the villain. I could have fought back. I could have told everyone what really happened when I turned 18, how I was thrown out like trash. But a part of me didn't want to play their game. I'd spent too many years letting their narrative shape my life. I wasn't going to beg people to believe me. That was the beginning of the slow unraveling. Nathan started showing up in person. First, it was the parking lot. Then the lobby. Then once, he was waiting outside my door. Always with that same hangdog expression, like he was just too beaten down to even speak above a whisper. "I'm not here to fight," he said one evening, hands in his pockets. "I just need help." "I'm not the one you should be asking," I replied, trying not to slam the door in his face. "But you're the only one who can." That line stuck with me, not because it was true, but because he believed it. My parents had conditioned him to see me not as a brother, but as a safety net. And now that they'd run out of rope, they were throwing him onto me like dead weight. Then came the real breaking point. I was at work, knee-deep in a network issue, when I got a call from my landlord. Not something that ever happened. I picked up, worried something was wrong with the building. "Hi, Alex," he said, sounding unusually cheerful. "Just wanted to confirm you're moving out by the 1st, right?" I blinked. "Wait, what?" "Well, your brother stopped by this morning. Said you were moving out and transferring the lease to him. He had paperwork and everything." My heart dropped into my stomach. "No," I said slowly. "I never said that. I'm not moving out." There was a pause. "Oh, he said you asked him to handle it while you were at work." I couldn't speak. My fingers were shaking. "Don't worry," the landlord added quickly. "Nothing's changed yet. I figured I'd call to confirm, just in case." I hung up and rushed home. Sure enough, when I got there, Nathan was waiting outside my door again. But this time, he had a backpack with him, and a smug look on his face. "What the hell did you do?" I snapped. He had the nerve to look confused. "What do you mean? You told my landlord I'm moving out? Are you insane?" He shrugged. "I figured you'd come around eventually. I was just speeding things up." "By lying? By forging my name?" "It's not forgery if we're family," he said, like that made any kind of sense. "I was just trying to help." I stared at him, stunned. "Help who?" "You. Me. Everyone. This back and forth is tearing the family apart. Once I'm settled in, we can fix all this." That was when I realized something. Nathan didn't see what he was doing as wrong. He honestly believed he was the victim, that he was entitled to my apartment, my life, my stability. And the scariest part? He didn't even see me as a person. I was just the next stepping stone. That night, I locked every window and door. I texted my landlord and told him under no circumstances was anyone allowed to make changes to my lease but me. I changed my locks the next morning. I even bought a small camera to put in my entryway. I didn't care if it was paranoid. I needed proof if anything else happened. And it did. The next week, I came home to find my lock scratched. Not broken, but clearly tampered with. I checked the footage. It was my father. He had tried to break in. That was it. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to be decent. The moment I accepted they weren't just entitled, they were dangerous. I wasn't going to defend myself anymore. I was going to prepare. And if they thought I'd sit quietly while they tried to dismantle my life piece by piece, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Because this time, I wasn't alone. And I wasn't playing defense anymore. Now I was planning something they would never see coming. When I watched that footage, my father, trying to pick my lock like some second-rate criminal, I didn't feel fear. Not at first. I felt cold. Numb. There was this strange, delayed silence in my brain, like my mind was buffering what I'd just seen. He didn't even wear gloves. No mask. Just a baseball cap and a jacket I recognized from my childhood, like he'd just come from the grocery store and decided to casually commit a felony on his way home. The only reason he didn't get in was because I'd changed the lock that morning. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I was scared. Not because I thought they'd hurt me physically, though at that point, I wasn't ruling anything out, but because I'd finally accepted what I'd been denying since I was 18. They didn't love me. Not really. Maybe they loved the idea of me. The version that quietly disappeared, didn't cause trouble, didn't get in Nathan's way. But me, the version who survived without them, who dared to say no, that person was a threat. An obstacle. And obstacles got moved. I sent the footage to my landlord immediately, told him I was considering filing a police report. He was sympathetic, a little stunned, but also nervous. Said if I felt unsafe, maybe I should think about moving. I knew he meant well, but I couldn't help feeling like I was being punished for my father's actions. Again, the next few weeks were a blur. I didn't sleep well. Every time I passed a window, I checked for shadows. I stopped wearing headphones on my way home. I even started carrying pepper spray, and I hated that. Hated what it meant. That I wasn't safe, not from strangers, but from my own family. That's what broke me. It wasn't the messages from extended relatives. It wasn't Nathan's fake lease paperwork. It wasn't even my father trying to break in. It was the realization that, if something had happened, if I hadn't changed that lock, if I had come home 10 minutes earlier, there would be no justice. No support. No one in my family would have believed me. In fact, they probably would have blamed me for overreacting. Again, that's when I hit bottom. I called in sick for the first time in years. Didn't leave the apartment for 3 straight days. Didn't answer texts. I canceled every plan, let the dishes pile up, turned off my phone at night, just so I could feel what silence felt like again. I sat on the couch, replaying that video on loop until the battery drained. My own father. Hands shaking. Eyes darting. Like a stranger. I remember crying once, just once, during that stretch. Not loud or messy, just sitting on the bathroom floor, holding a towel, feeling every ounce of strength leak out of me like air from a popped balloon. I wasn't sobbing. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. Tired of fighting for space that should have been mine to begin with. Tired of pretending I was fine. Tired of building and rebuilding when no one ever even saw the foundation. But somewhere in that quiet, something shifted. I don't know what exactly triggered it. Maybe it was seeing how far they were willing to go. Or maybe it was finally admitting how badly I'd been hurt. But for the first time in years, I stopped reacting. And I started planning. First, I pulled all my security footage from the last month. I archived everything, created backups, uploaded the files to cloud storage with passwords. I documented every interaction, the voicemail, the text messages, even screenshots of Facebook comments from distant relatives parroting the same guilt trip language. I turned my apartment into a case file. Then I started locking down my life. I changed every password, set up 2-factor authentication on every account. I called my credit card companies, placed fraud alerts on my credit profile, and even pulled my credit report just to check. Nothing suspicious yet, but I wasn't going to wait. Next, I told my boss everything. Not the whole sob story, but enough. I told him I was dealing with a family situation. There might be people trying to contact me or show up at the office. To my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. Gave me a few days off to take care of what matters, and even offered to forward any unknown callers straight to voicemail. Funny how strangers show more grace than family. I used those days to meet with a lawyer. Found her through a friend of a friend. A quiet, serious woman named Jordan who listened without flinching. I laid out everything. The eviction at 18. The sudden reappearance. The manipulation. The attempted lease fraud. The break-in. The surveillance footage. The paper trail. She didn't interrupt. She didn't act shocked. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "You have grounds for a restraining order. And maybe more, depending on how far this goes." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. That conversation sparked something in me I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. Control. Not revenge. Not yet. But power. And that was enough to start healing. In the following months, I shifted my focus inward. I enrolled in a certification course I'd been putting off for years. Something about cloud infrastructure and data security. Boring to most, but to me it was a ladder. Every night, I came home, made dinner, and studied. No distractions. No drama. Just progress. I started seeing a therapist, too. Just once a week at first. Then twice. Her name was Elena, and she didn't coddle me. She called out my avoidance. She gently pointed out my patterns. She helped me realize I wasn't broken. I'd just been surviving on autopilot for so long. I didn't know how to feel safe even when I was safe. One session, I told her I didn't think I'd ever fully trust anyone again. She said, "Maybe you don't have to. Maybe it's not about trusting everyone. Just learning how to trust yourself not to let them get too close." That stuck with me. Over time, I made new friends. Real ones. People who didn't want anything from me. I joined a running group, which, if you knew me, would sound hilarious. And somehow, sweating alongside strangers made me feel human again. I even started dating casually. Nothing serious. But I smiled more. Laughed, even. Sometimes I caught myself walking around my apartment, just content. I hadn't felt that in a decade. But that peace came with clarity. Because even though I was rebuilding, piece by piece, breath by breath, I hadn't forgotten. They were still out there. Still lying. Still twisting my story into something unrecognizable. And while I didn't want to live in the past, I also wasn't about to let it rewrite itself without a fight. Especially because of what came next. It started with a letter. Not a text. Not a knock. A formal letter, mailed to my apartment. Handwritten return address. No stamp, just slipped into my mailbox. It was from my mother. I stared at the envelope for 10 full minutes before opening it. The letter was 3 pages long. Neat handwriting. The same loopy cursive she used to write on birthday cards, back when she still remembered to buy them. It started off with the usual, "We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Things were hard back then." Then it shifted. She wrote that Nathan was going through a deep depression and had begun making serious plans to fix his life. She said they wanted to transfer the family home to him, to give him a fresh start, but that some paperwork still had my name listed as an heir from years ago, when my grandfather left a small inheritance to me and Nathan jointly. She asked me to sign a few things. Said it was just a formality. Said it was just paperwork. I folded the letter, set it on the table, and sat there for a long time. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore. They were after something bigger now. Something tied to family property, inheritance, land, things I didn't even know I had a legal tie to. But they knew. They always knew. And they'd kept quiet until they needed something. Until he needed something. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel broken. I felt focused. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about setting the record straight, legally, financially, and emotionally. And for the first time in my life, I was going to write my own ending. But first, I had to gather every piece of the puzzle they thought I'd forgotten. And once it was all in place, they'd finally understand what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. By the time I finished reading my mother's letter for the 3rd time, I wasn't just suspicious, I was certain. They were trying to erase me. Not metaphorically, legally, quietly, permanently. The wording wasn't angry or threatening. That's what made it worse. It was sanitized, coated in that fake kindness they used to use when I was a kid asking why Nathan got dessert and I didn't. It's not about fairness, sweetie. It's about what's best for everyone. Only this time, it wasn't about dessert. It was about the family home, a house I hadn't thought about in years. I don't know if you've ever had to dig through the legal graveyard of your own childhood, but it's a strange experience. I started by emailing Jordan, my lawyer, and sent her the letter. Her reply came within the hour. If they're asking you to sign anything related to your grandfather's will, don't. Not yet. Let's pull the documents first and see what they're trying to override. That was the spark. She filed a request for the original estate documentation the next morning. While we waited, I started doing what I do best, documenting. I created a digital folder titled Operation Cleanup because humor helped keep the fury from boiling over. I went through every piece of communication, texts, voicemails, letters, and created a timeline. I also started writing a personal statement, just to keep my thoughts in order. That process, it was unexpectedly cathartic. Writing everything down, I started noticing things I'd missed in the moment. Like how each reaching out moment from my family had a purpose. Not connection, not reconciliation, just extraction. They only ever contacted me when they needed something. The groceries when I was 14 and Dad forgot his wallet. That turned into a "you owe us for raising you" argument by dinner. The time I gave Nathan my laptop when his broke in high school turned into him telling everyone I was so generous, while our parents acted like it was a birthday gift they gave him. Even now, after a decade of silence, they hadn't come back to apologize. They came back with a plan. Well, now I had one too. 2 days later, Jordan called. "I've got something," she said, her voice low, even though I was on speaker in my own apartment. The inheritance. Yep. Your grandfather left a joint trust, split 50-50 between you and Nathan. But here's the thing. The house your parents live in? It was never theirs to keep. It was bought under that trust, and your grandfather's instructions were explicit. What kind of instructions? I asked, heart hammering. If the property is sold, proceeds must be split evenly. If it's kept, both heirs must consent to any transfer of title. They can't sign it over to Nathan without your permission. I sat in stunned silence. They'd been living there for over a decade. They must have known, or at least suspected, which meant this whole time, they were hoping I'd either never find out or be naive enough to sign it away without asking questions. Jordan continued, if you want, we can put a formal block on any attempts to transfer ownership, but it might alert them that you know. No, I said slowly. Let them think I'm still considering it. I want them to get comfortable. She was quiet for a second. Alex, are you planning something? I'm planning to make sure they never try this again. The setup took weeks. Step 1 was information. I requested property tax records, deed history, and every document tied to the trust. Jordan handled most of the legal side, but I wanted to understand it. The more I read, the angrier I got. They'd manipulated loopholes, skirted co-ownership clauses, and basically lived off my inheritance while pretending it was their God-given right. Even their renovation permits listed Nathan's name as future beneficiary. Step 2 was silence. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't call. I didn't push back. And that drove them nuts. A week later, I got a follow-up note from my mom. Shorter, more emotional, filled with underlined words like family and unity and legacy. There was even a little line at the end that made me laugh out loud. We hope you're not letting old wounds cloud your judgment. Cloud my judgment? They made me homeless on my birthday. But I stayed quiet. Let them believe I was still the hesitant, soft-spoken kid they booted at 18. Meanwhile, step 3 was already in motion, allies. I started by calling my cousin Rachel. We weren't close growing up. She lived across the state, but we'd always gotten along. She had messaged me months ago during the family guilt campaign, but she wasn't aggressive like the others. Just confused. Curious. She picked up on the second ring. Alex. Hey, Ratch. Got a second? That one conversation opened a floodgate. Turns out, Rachel had her own issues with my parents. And Nathan. Especially Nathan. At a family reunion a few years back, he'd cornered her husband about investment opportunities, trying to sell him on some shady crypto project. She'd never trusted him since. Once I told her what was really going on, the property, the trust, the manipulation, she was furious. I knew something was off when Aunt Linda acted like they owned that house outright. I remember Grandpa always saying it was for the boys, not for Nathan. We talked for an hour. Before hanging up, she said, whatever you're planning, I'm in. After that, I reached out to 3 more cousins, 2 of whom had also been iced out of the family for minor offenses, like dating someone not respectable or moving out of state without permission. Same story, different details. Within a week, I had a mini network of black sheep, all of them willing to back me up publicly if things went sideways. Some of them had old photos, letters, even voicemails that hinted at the trust situation, evidence that would further establish that my parents knew the terms and just chose to ignore them. But the final setup? That came when I got a call from Nathan himself. I let it go to voicemail. His tone had shifted again, no longer pitiful. Confident. A little smug. Hey, Alex. Look, I know you're taking your time with the paperwork, but just a heads up. Mom and Dad are getting everything finalized with the lawyer. We're hoping to wrap things up this month. It'd be easier if you just signed and sent it over, but I get it. Sometimes you gotta feel like you're in control. Just don't take too long. Family's watching. That message was the last piece I needed. They were moving forward. Illegally. And they'd left a breadcrumb trail of intent in writing. Perfect. The next morning, I met Jordan at her office and outlined my final plan. We drafted a cease and desist letter to their lawyer, citing the exact clauses of the trust they were violating. But instead of sending it immediately, we waited. I wanted to time it perfectly. I knew Nathan's birthday was coming up. They always made a big deal about it. Family dinner, gifts, emotional speeches about his potential. If they were going to make a formal announcement about the house, that'd be the night. Jordan agreed to be on standby with the letter and injunction paperwork, just in case. But I had one more card to play. A week before the birthday dinner, I made a quiet call to a local investigative journalist, someone who'd covered shady real estate deals before. I sent over the public trust documents, the family letter, and a redacted version of the voicemail. Just enough to get them interested. And they were. Turns out, inheritance fraud tied to elderly estates was a hot topic, especially when one sibling had been kicked out at 18 and the other was trying to force them out of their share years later. I didn't tell them everything, just enough for now, because the revenge wasn't complete yet. But the trap? It was set, and I was done playing nice. The night of Nathan's birthday dinner, I didn't sleep. Not from nerves, not from fear. From focus. Everything was ready. The documentation had been reviewed, the legal response drafted, and my phone was charged at 100%. I even set a reminder titled "Drop the Hammer" at exactly 7:30 p.m., just in time for the big family speech I knew my father would give. Jordan was standing by with the court injunction. The journalist had already emailed me twice asking if I had a comment to include in their final draft, which was set to go live that weekend. This wasn't revenge out of anger. That would have been easy. This was revenge born from survival. From 10 years of silence. Of being erased. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about reminding them that I exist. I dressed in a plain black button-up. Not to show up in person, but because I wanted to look put together when I FaceTimed Rachel. She was already at the birthday dinner, seated at the far end of the table like an outsider. She'd agreed to go on one condition, that she record everything. At 7:24, she texted, "He's starting." Then, at 7:28, "They're bringing out a giant cake." Dad just stood up with a glass. I opened my laptop, clicked into the shared drive folder I'd titled Inheritance Audit, and made sure everything was visible and time-stamped. Emails, voicemails, texts, copies of the trust, the letter from Mom, Nathan's smug voicemail, all of it. And then I waited. Rachel called me at 7:33. I answered immediately and saw her holding the camera low, under the table. The video was shaky, but I could see the room. A backyard lit by string lights. Nathan at the head of a long outdoor table, wearing a polo shirt and a fake grin. My parents standing on either side of him, beaming like politicians. My dad raised a glass. "To Nathan," he said, loud enough for the recording to catch everything. "Who's always been the rock of this family, and who's finally ready to take on the responsibility of being homeowner of the family house." There were polite claps. My mother wiped a fake tear. Rachel slowly tilted the camera up. I saw Nathan smile and lift his own glass. "I'm honored," he said. "It's been a long journey. And I just want to thank Mom and Dad for trusting me with this legacy. We've already started the paperwork, so it's official." I smiled and nodded to myself. It was time. I texted Jordan one word. "Now." Within 30 seconds, the cease and desist letter hit their lawyer's inbox with a high-importance flag. A copy also went to my parents' shared email. Another to the county recorder's office, to block any title transfers under the trust. But the final nail? That came from the journalist. I opened the article draft one last time. The headline read, "The Invisible Heir, Family Trust Dispute Reveals Ugly Battle Over Inheritance, Alleged Deception, and Legal Trickery." I clicked send on my statement. They erased me the day I turned 18. Now they'll never forget who I am. The article went live 5 minutes later. I knew they saw it within the hour, because by 8:45, my phone exploded. It started with Rachel's text. "Your mom just screamed. Your dad's on the phone yelling at someone. Nathan's face is white." Then Jordan emailed. "Just got word from the county. Title is frozen pending review. You're secure." Then silence. For 2 full days. No calls. No knocks. No guilt trip letters. Just silence. Until the fallout began. Monday morning, I got a call from Jordan. "They're pushing back," she said calmly. Nathan's lawyer responded, "But it's sloppy. They're claiming implied transfer rights, but the trust is airtight." This is exactly what we expected. What's our next step? We counter with evidence. Full documentation of your occupancy termination at 18. The inheritance clause. Their attempts to coerce and misrepresent your position. It's not just civil court territory anymore. We may be talking criminal fraud. That word, fraud, felt like justice. It wasn't just that they'd try to take the house. It was the fact that they'd planned it so carefully, assuming I wouldn't fight back. That I was still the weak one. The invisible one. But the truth was, they never bothered to check who I'd become. Over the next 2 weeks, the article picked up traction. Not viral, but enough to stir some attention in our small town. A few neighbors reached out, asking if I was okay. One even said, Your dad always talked about how proud he was of his two sons. Didn't know they meant one. I didn't reply. Let the truth do the talking. Legally, the house was locked in a holding pattern. Any sale or title transfer was impossible without my signature. Their lawyers started backing off. Fast. Especially when Jordan filed a formal report with the State Bar Association citing ethical violations in the attempted deed transfer without full heir consent. That got their attention. But the real fallout? It happened within the family. Word started to spread. Rachel told me that Aunt June confronted my parents at church and asked if the article was true. That she'd always wondered why I never came around anymore. That maybe they owed me more than a phone call. Then my cousin Will posted the article on Facebook with the caption, "Funny how some people forget who helped build the foundation when they're decorating the living room." One by one, the cracks deepened. My parents tried damage control. My mom sent a long email titled "Our Side of the Story," claiming I was twisting facts, that they were just trying to do right by both sons. It was filled with passive-aggressive digs and fake apologies like, "We're sorry you feel wronged," and "You've always been too sensitive." I forwarded it to Jordan. She laughed and said, "This is gold. Keep everything." Then Nathan finally called me. I stared at the screen for a while before answering. He didn't say hello. He just said, "Why are you doing this?" I leaned back in my chair. "You mean defending what's mine? You're tearing the family apart." "No," I said. "I'm just refusing to let you steal from me." "It was never about stealing. You lied to my landlord. You tried to take my lease. You forged paperwork. You went behind my back with the trust. What would you call it?" He didn't answer. So I kept going. "You let them throw me out when I was 18. You watched me disappear and never once asked if I was okay. And now, you want to pretend like this was all just a big misunderstanding." "I was a kid," he snapped. "So was I. Difference is, I didn't have parents fighting for me." There was a long pause. Then, quietly, he said, "They're going to lose the house." I didn't say anything. "Do you even care?" I thought about that. About how many nights I spent wondering why I wasn't enough. About the times I'd rehearsed family conversations in my head just to feel sane. About the empty birthdays. The lonely holidays. The silence that swallowed my 20s whole. "No," I said finally. "I care that they remember why." A month later, the final paperwork came through. The house was to be sold. Per the trust, I would receive half of the proceeds, over $180,000. My parents would need to vacate within 90 days. Jordan handled the logistics. I never saw them in court, but I did get one last envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo of the house, the backyard, the table where Nathan had made his little speech, and scribbled in black ink across the top were the words, "Hope you're happy." I pinned it to my fridge, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That silence doesn't mean weakness. That distance doesn't mean defeat. And that sometimes the best way to get the last word is to build a life where they don't get a say at all. And that's exactly what I did. I'm Caleb, 32, and I swear my family has made a sport out of reminding me where I stand in the pecking order. You know how some families joke about the golden child and the forgotten child? Mine isn't a joke. It's practically a tradition at this point. My brother Ethan is the star quarterback of their lives, and I'm the guy they call when they need their Wi-Fi fixed. Last Christmas should have been my first clue that things were only getting worse. My wife and I had spent weeks saving up to get decent gifts for everyone, even though we're not exactly swimming in cash. She crocheted matching scarves for my mom and dad. I found this rare vinyl record my dad had been hunting for since the 80s, and we got my brother's kids a Lego set they'd been begging for all year. The living room smelled like cinnamon and pine when we walked in, arms loaded with bags, feeling proud that we'd made it work on our budget. But when it came time to exchange gifts, my mom cleared her throat and said, "Caleb, honey, I'm so sorry. We couldn't afford gifts for your kids this year." She said it so softly, like she was announcing a tragedy. I just nodded, told my kids to sit tight, and pretended it didn't sting. I figured, okay, times are tough, maybe they really can't. Then I watched Ethan's kids tear through wrapping paper like a Christmas morning commercial. iPads, designer sneakers, personalized leather jackets with their initials stitched on the back. The whole living room was a mountain of boxes, and Ethan was sitting in the middle like Santa Claus, grinning and taking credit for half of them even though I knew Mom and Dad had pitched in. I sat there with this weird smile plastered on my face, my stomach twisting into knots. My daughter, Emma, tried to hide her disappointment. But she's 7. Subtlety isn't exactly her strong suit. She looked at me with those big watery eyes like she was asking what she'd done wrong. My son, Max, just went quiet, his little hands still clutching the wrapped book we'd gotten for Grandpa. When we got up to leave, Dad chuckled like he'd just told a joke I'd missed. "You know times are hard, son," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "Next year will be better." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Because here's the thing, I know exactly how hard times are for them. Dad just got a bonus at work. Mom still posts pictures of her spa days every other week. And I'd just seen Ethan bragging on Facebook about the custom grill he installed on his new truck, the one Dad co-signed the loan for. I drove home that night in silence. My wife didn't even turn on the radio, just reached over and squeezed my hand once. The kids fell asleep in the back, their little heads leaning against each other. I felt something cold settle in my chest, heavier than anger. It was this hollow, numb feeling, like something inside me had finally clicked into place. That night, I stayed up late scrolling through old family photos, wondering when exactly I stopped being their priority. Was it when I chose a trade school instead of college like Ethan? Was it because I work as a mechanic instead of an engineer? Or maybe it's just because I don't make them look good at family parties. The next morning, I woke up to a string of texts in the family group chat. Pictures of Ethan's kids showing off their new gifts, Mom gushing over how blessed she felt, Dad making jokes about Santa's little helpers. No one mentioned my kids. Not one word. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could have let it go, but something inside me was done playing along. I wasn't going to just swallow this one like every other year. And that's when I got the idea, a little spark at first, but the longer I thought about it, the more it turned into a plan. The week after Christmas was always when we'd have the casual family brunch, which in my family means everyone gathers at Mom and Dad's house, complains about the weather, and pretends nothing awkward happened at Christmas. Normally I'd beg off, but my wife suggested we go. "Maybe it'll clear the air," she said gently, though the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe it either. So we went. I pulled up to my parents' driveway and noticed Ethan's brand new truck parked proudly out front, the one with the custom grill and rims that probably cost more than my car is worth. He was standing outside, holding a beer, like he was waiting to show it off. "Check it out, little bro," he said as soon as I stepped out of the car. He tapped the side mirror. "Dad helped me upgrade the suspension too. Rides like a dream. You should think about trading up." I nodded, tight-lipped, trying not to think about the fact that I'd been patching up my old hatchback just to keep it running. Inside, Mom was already setting the table, humming cheerfully, like she hadn't just told my kids Santa skipped them this year. During brunch, the conversation kept circling back to Ethan, his promotion, his truck, the private school he was thinking of enrolling his kids in. Mom was practically glowing, asking questions, bragging like she was the one who'd gotten promoted. When my wife mentioned, very casually, that Max had gotten an award at school for perfect attendance, Mom smiled politely and then immediately pivoted back to Ethan's kids. "That's nice, dear. Oh, Ethan, did you tell everyone about Sophie's piano recital?" It was like my kids were invisible. I caught Emma tracing little circles on the tablecloth with her finger, her face blank. Then came the part that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. Mom stood up halfway through dessert and clinked her glass for attention. "Since we're all together," she said sweetly, "we wanted to let everyone know we've decided to start a family fund." I frowned. "Eh, what?" Dad smiled like he was announcing a charity drive. "A family fund. Everyone chips in a little each month so we can help each other out when times are tough. Emergencies, kids' birthdays, vacations, keep things fair." My stomach dropped. "Fair," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Mom said, looking right at me. "We know you've been struggling a bit this year, Caleb, and we want to make sure we can all support each other." For a second, I almost felt touched, until Ethan spoke up. "Yeah, and it'll help cover things like when the kids need new tablets for school or, when someone wants to throw a big birthday party." I blinked. "Hold on. Are we talking about a slush fund for your kids' iPads?" Mom's face went tight. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone will benefit." "Really? Because last week my kids didn't even get a pair of socks, but your grandkids got designer jackets." I wasn't yelling, but my voice was sharper than I intended. The room went quiet for a beat, then Dad chuckled like I'd told a joke. "We had to cut back this year, son." "Cut back on what?" I I shot back. Your vacation? Your truck upgrades? Ethan raised his hands, smirking. Hey, don't take it out on me just because I'm doing well. That was the moment I realized there wasn't going to be any clearing the air. They didn't see what they were doing, or worse, they did, and they didn't care. I dropped it for the kids' sake. But when we got home, I sat in the garage for half an hour before going inside. My wife eventually came out and sat next to me on the cold step. You okay? She asked softly. No, I admitted. But I think I know what I need to do. Over the next few weeks, the group chat blew up with updates about Ethan's life. Pictures of the kids at ski lessons. Mom asking everyone to chip in for Sophie's dance recital costume. A reminder about the family fund with a suggested contribution amount that was laughably high considering our budget. I didn't respond at first, but one night Mom called me directly. Caleb, honey, did you see the message about the family fund? We really need to get this rolling. Your brother already contributed. Of course he did, I muttered. Mom sighed. We just want everyone to have equal opportunities. You don't want your kids to feel left out, do you? I actually laughed at that, a short, humorless sound. They already are left out, Mom. You made sure of that at Christmas. She was quiet for a moment. Don't be cruel, Caleb. You know we love your kids. We're just trying to. To what? Keep Ethan on a pedestal? Make sure he never has to pay for anything by himself. Her voice turned sharp. Watch your tone. We're doing what's best for the family. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But my hands were shaking, and I realized this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was manipulation. They weren't just ignoring my kids. They were trying to make me bankroll Ethan's life. A few days later, Dad sent me a message that made my blood boil. Hey son, just a reminder about the fund. We figured since Ethan's kids have some big expenses coming up, you could double your first month's contribution. You don't want them to miss out, right? I stared at the screen, feeling that cold, hollow click again, like the night of Christmas. No, I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into paying for their kids' iPads while mine were being ignored. And that's when the idea that had been smoldering in the back of my mind flared up again. Bigger, sharper, more focused this time. I didn't just want to opt out. I wanted them to feel what we felt. A few weeks later, I got a text from Mom that simply said, family dinner. This Saturday. Everyone's coming. No explanation, no context. Just an expectation. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to stay home, order takeout, and watch a movie with the kids. But my wife convinced me. If you skip, they'll just say you're being dramatic. So we went. When we got there, the house was buzzing. The table was set like a holiday feast, way fancier than usual. Candles, real china, the works. I was confused until I walked into the living room and saw a massive stack of wrapped boxes against the wall. What's all this? I asked slowly. Mom beamed. Oh, we wanted to do a little something special for the grandkids. Make up for Christmas. I felt a cautious spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had actually listened. Maybe this was their way of apologizing for leaving my kids out. Then I saw Ethan's kids come barreling into the room, screaming with excitement. Is it time? Can we open them now? Mom clapped her hands. Go ahead. Paper flew everywhere. Shiny new headphones. Name-brand clothes. A freaking Nintendo Switch. I glanced at my kids. Emma's face lit up for a split second, like she thought this was for them too. She sat on her knees, waiting, patient. Then I realized. There were no presents for my kids. Not a single box with their name on it. Where are? I started, my voice tight. Mom must have read my mind. She smiled sympathetically. Oh, sweetheart, we figured we'd wait to get something for your two until the family fund is set up. We don't want them to feel shortchanged if we can't match what Ethan's kids get. I just stared at her. So you gave Ethan's kids everything now, and mine get to wait? Dad chimed in like this was some perfectly reasonable solution. Exactly. That way we can make sure it's all fair. I laughed. I couldn't help it. This bitter, disbelieving laugh that made everyone turn to look at me. Fair? You call this fair? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Come on, Caleb. They're just gifts. Don't make it a big deal. But it was a big deal. Emma's face crumpled. She didn't cry, not in front of everyone, but I saw her little shoulders slump as she slipped off the couch and went to sit by the window. Max sat there stone-faced, gripping the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. My wife caught my eye, her jaw set, but she didn't say anything. She knew this was my moment. I stood up slowly. We're leaving. Mom blinked. Don't be ridiculous. Dinner's almost ready. No, I said louder this time. We're leaving. Right now. I gathered the kids, ignoring Ethan's little chuckle behind me, and walked them out to the car. My wife followed silently. The entire drive home, nobody spoke. It wasn't until we got back to the house and the kids were in bed that I finally let the anger boil over. I'm done, I said, pacing the kitchen. I am so completely done with this. They didn't just forget this time, they planned it. They invited us over to watch our kids sit empty-handed while Ethan's got everything. My wife nodded grimly. I know, and they expected you to smile through it. I sat down hard at the table, running a hand through my hair. I've been swallowing this for years. The little digs. The favoritism. The way they treat Ethan like he can do no wrong. But tonight, I broke off, shaking my head. Tonight was different. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Then stop letting them do it. Stop showing up for them when they won't show up for you. Her words stuck with me. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, and a cheerful text from Ethan. Sorry if we made things awkward last night. Mom said you overreacted, but don't take it personally. The kids were thrilled. I stared at the message until my phone dimmed and locked. And then came the final straw. 2 days later, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. It was a picture of a giant backyard party, balloons, banners, catering trays lined up on a table. Mom had captioned it, "Surprise party for Sophie." Couldn't wait. She deserves this. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Sophie's party. The one they'd been talking about for weeks. The one they asked me to contribute to through the family fund. I hadn't sent them a dime, and they went ahead and threw the party anyway. And they hadn't even told us about it. I scrolled through the photos, my chest tightening. There were pictures of Ethan's kids opening more gifts, Mom and Dad grinning, relatives I hadn't seen in months laughing in the background. There wasn't a single empty chair at that party, except for the ones where my family should have been sitting. That night, Emma climbed into my lap and asked, "Daddy, why don't we go to the fun parties anymore?" I didn't have an answer for her. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was exclusion. Deliberate. Calculated. And I realized something. They weren't going to change. Not on their own. If I wanted my kids to stop being hurt, if I wanted to stop feeling like the forgotten son, I was going to have to do something drastic. Something they wouldn't be able to ignore. And that's when the plan really started to take shape. The week after Sophie's party, the house felt heavier. It wasn't just me. The kids were quieter too. Emma stopped asking when we'd see Grandma and Grandpa again. Max kept to himself, reading in his room, barely coming out except for meals. My wife and I exchanged these loaded looks, the kind where no words are needed because we both knew something had shifted permanently. I went through the motions at work, but even my coworkers noticed something was off. "You good, man?" my buddy Drew asked as we were closing up the shop one night. I shrugged, muttered something about family stuff, and left before he could press further. The worst part was the group chat. Every day, without fail, a new message popped up. Photos from Ethan's housewarming. Clips of the kids playing with their new Switch. Mom asking everyone for input on the family vacation they were planning for spring. A vacation I clearly wasn't invited to. At least, not yet. Finally, I muted the chat. I didn't leave, not yet, but I couldn't stomach another cheery update while my kids sat at home wondering why they weren't included. One night, I sat in the garage again, staring at the tools hanging on the wall, the faint smell of oil and grease grounding me. My wife came out and leaned against the doorframe. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said softly. "I know." My voice sounded flat. "But if I stop showing up completely, it's just going to give them more ammo. See? Caleb's being difficult again. Caleb doesn't want to be part of the family." She walked over, sat next to me, and put a hand on my knee. "You don't owe them your peace of mind just to avoid their gossip." Her words hit me like a hammer. I realized I had been performing, showing up to family events, smiling through gritted teeth, pretending everything was fine, just so I wouldn't be labeled the problem. And for what? It didn't stop them from excluding my kids. It didn't stop them from asking for money. It didn't stop them from throwing a party behind our backs and posting about it like it was some big win. Something had to change. So I started small. I stopped volunteering to host. I stopped rearranging my work schedule to make their events. I started putting my kids' activities first, even if it meant missing a Sunday dinner. At first, Mom noticed. She called me one evening, her voice sharp. "Caleb, we didn't see you at brunch today. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I said evenly. Max had a science fair project due. We stayed home to finish it. She'd scared. Well, you could have come after. We didn't want to, I said, cutting her off. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a chilly, I see. After that, I heard from her less and less. But pulling away didn't magically make the hurt go away. If anything, it made it worse, because now I had space to actually feel it. One night after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one from 3 years ago, my dad holding Max at his 5th birthday party, both of them grinning, frosting smeared on Max's cheeks. Back then, we were all still close. Back then, I still believed that my parents loved my kids the same as Ethan's. I put the phone down and just sat there, staring at nothing. I realized I was mourning something that wasn't dead, not yet, but maybe it needed to be. That was the lowest point. The breaking point came a week later. It was a rainy Saturday morning when Dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hey, son," he said casually, like nothing had happened. "Listen, Ethan's truck payment came due a little earlier than he expected this month. We were thinking this would be a good chance for the family fund to kick in." I went very still. "There is no family fund, Dad. At least, not one I've agreed to." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Caleb, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's just one payment. You can afford it." I actually laughed. "You're asking me, the guy whose kids got nothing for Christmas, to pay for Ethan's truck? You know he's got a lot on his plate right now," Dad said irritably. "He can't do it all himself." My hand tightened on the phone. "Neither can I. But you don't seem to care about that." "Watch your tone," he snapped. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in silence for a long time after that call, my heart pounding. That was when something inside me clicked for the last time. This wasn't about peace anymore. This wasn't about trying to keep the family together. This was about respect, and I wasn't going to get any until I stopped asking for it and started taking it. That night, while the kids were watching a movie, I opened my laptop and started going through my files, bank statements, tax returns, property records. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew I needed to get my ducks in a row. Because when I finally made my move, I wanted it to be impossible for them to ignore. Once I made the decision to stop begging for respect, it was like someone flipped a switch. I woke up the next morning with this strange clarity, like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying for years. The first thing I did was take a hard look at our finances. I stayed up late that night with my laptop, going through everything line by line. For the first time, I wasn't just trying to survive, I was thinking strategically. If my family was going to keep treating us like second-class citizens, then I was going to make sure we were strong enough to never need them again. I cut out anything that wasn't essential. Old subscriptions, impulse purchases, gone. I called up a buddy who'd been asking me to help him on the side with car restorations, and I said yes. Weekends that used to be spent at family events were now spent in the shop, hands deep in engine grease. But for the first time, I didn't mind. Every extra dollar we made went straight into savings. My wife noticed the change first. "You seem lighter," she said one night as we sat on the couch together. "I am," I admitted. "It's like I finally stopped playing their game." The side work started paying off faster than I expected. Within a few months, we'd saved enough to pay off the last bit of debt we'd been carrying since Emma was born. For the first time in years, we had breathing room. And that breathing room gave me ideas. One of the guys I worked with mentioned that a small commercial garage across town was looking for a new owner. It wasn't fancy, but it had good bones, 3 bays, a waiting area, and a loyal customer base. The owner was retiring and wanted to sell it cheap. At first, I hesitated. Buying a business felt huge, risky, but my wife was the one who pushed me. "You've been running half this shop for years," she said. "Why not run your own?" So we did. I scraped together every bit of savings we had, got a small loan, and signed the papers. Just like that, we were business owners. The first few months were hard. Long days, longer nights. But it was ours. I poured everything into that shop. New tools, fresh paint on the walls, a logo that Emma helped design. Max set up a little corner with free coffee and coloring books for customers' kids. Word spread quickly. People liked that we were local, family-run, and honest. Within 6 months, business was booming. I hired 2 extra guys to help with the workload and even managed to give myself a modest salary bump. And with every passing week, I felt myself standing a little taller. It wasn't just about the money, though that definitely helped. It was about control. For the first time, I wasn't dependent on anyone else's schedule, anyone else's approval. Meanwhile, my parents were still sending the occasional text about family updates, but I noticed the tone had shifted. There was less bragging, more fishing. "How's the shop doing?" Dad would ask. "Business good." I kept my answers short. "Good," I'd reply. Nothing more. The less I gave them, the more curious they seemed to get. Then came the moment that made me realize just how much things had changed. One Friday night, we were closing up the shop when a customer came in last minute with a car that needed urgent repairs. I stayed late to finish it myself, and when the man came back to pick it up, he handed me cash and said, "You just saved my weekend, man. Keep the change." It was a $100 tip. I drove home that night with grease still on my hands, grinning like an idiot. My wife met me at the door, and when I showed her the cash, she laughed and hugged me so hard I almost dropped it. It hit me then. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were winning. The kids noticed too. Emma started talking about saving up for a keyboard so she could take piano lessons. Max asked if we could build a tree house in the backyard. Little things, but they felt like proof that we were finally moving forward. And every time I saw their smiles, I felt my resolve harden. Because while we were building something real, my parents and Ethan were still playing their game. They still sent out invites to events we'd love for you to attend, always with a price tag attached. Contribute to the fund, bring a dish, help clean up. I ignored most of them. Then one afternoon, Mom called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Caleb," she said, her tone overly bright. "We're planning a big family dinner next month. Your dad and I would really love for you to come. It's been too long." I said noncommittally. "And," she added, lowering her voice, "Ethan mentioned you've been doing well with the business. We're so proud of you." There it was. The fishing. "Thanks," I said evenly. "Well," she continued, "we were thinking it might be nice to do a little fundraiser for the family fund while everyone's together. You know, since things are going so well for you, maybe you could help set the tone with a generous contribution." I actually smiled. Because in that moment, I realized something. They still thought I was the same Caleb who would quietly open his wallet just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I had leverage now. Money. Independence. A business that was growing every day. And a plan forming in the back of my mind, sharper and more detailed with every interaction. If they wanted to put me on display at their little dinner, fine. I'd give them something to talk about. The call with Mom stuck in my head for days. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Like she was inviting me to play a part in some family performance. I knew then that I wasn't just going to decline their generous contribution request. I was going to use that dinner as the stage for something bigger. So I started preparing. The first thing I did was sit down with my wife and tell her everything I was thinking. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of bills pushed to the side, the kids in bed upstairs. "I think they're expecting me to come to this dinner and hand them money," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "And what are you going to do?" I smiled, the first real, unforced smile I'd had in weeks. "Not what they think." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Okay, tell me." So I did. I told her how I'd been keeping receipts, literal and metaphorical, of everything they'd done. How I'd saved screenshots of texts, copied messages from the family chat, even kept the voicemail from Dad asking me to cover Ethan's truck payment. She nodded slowly. "And what are you going to do with all of it?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I know one thing. I'm not walking into that dinner as the same Caleb they think they can guilt into paying. I want them to see exactly what they've done, and I want them to feel it." From that night on, I got serious about gathering everything I might need. I went through years of messages, pulling out every example of favoritism, every "don't tell Caleb" slip up, every time they'd excluded my kids from something. I put them all in a folder on my laptop, organized by year. It was sobering, seeing it all laid out like that. This wasn't just a one-off bad Christmas or a single missed party. It was a pattern that stretched back years. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep it went. There was one message thread from 2 years ago where Mom and Dad had been planning a surprise vacation for Ethan's kids, and in the middle of it, Mom texted, "Don't invite Caleb's family this time. He'll just complain about the cost." I stared at that one for a long time, feeling my jaw tighten. They hadn't just accidentally left us out. They had deliberately chosen to. That was when my plan shifted from quiet distancing to something more deliberate. If they wanted to make this dinner into a stage, I was going to turn it into a stage too, but for the truth. At the same time, the shop kept growing. Word of mouth was spreading like wildfire, and one afternoon a customer came in who changed everything. His name was Mr. Lawson, an older guy with a classic car that needed serious work. We got to talking while I worked on it, and it turned out he owned 3 commercial properties around town, including the strip where my shop was located. "You're the new owner, aren't you?" he said with a smile. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands. "Been here about 6 months." He nodded approvingly. "You're doing good work. You ever think about expanding?" I blinked. "Honestly, every day? But I figured that's a few years off." He chuckled. "Well, keep doing what you're doing. When the unit next to you opens up, I'll give you first crack at it. Better to have a good tenant expand than gamble on someone new." I thanked him, but inside I was buzzing. Expansion. More space. More bays. More income. And just like that, I had another card to play. Because if there was one thing I knew about my family, it was that they cared about appearances. And showing up to that dinner as the successful business owner who was already talking about expansion, that was going to hit differently. In the meantime, I made sure every part of my life was tight. Finances in order. Business records spotless. Personal savings at an all-time high. If they were going to try to paint me as the struggling son who needed their guidance, they weren't going to have a leg to stand on. Then, about a week before the dinner, I got a message from Ethan. "Hey man, just a heads up, Mom's planning to make a big announcement at the dinner. She wants everyone there. Don't bail this time." I stared at that message for a long time, my mind already racing. A big announcement. I had a sinking feeling I knew what it was. Probably something about the family fund, maybe even putting me on the spot in front of everyone. "Perfect." I replied with a simple, "We'll be there." But inside, something had settled into place. This was it. Everything I'd been feeling, all the frustration, all the anger, all the hurt, it was going to come to a head at that dinner. And for the first time, I wasn't dreading it. I was looking forward to it. I spent the next few days polishing up my evidence, printing out a few key messages, compiling screenshots into a neat little timeline. I didn't know exactly how I'd use them yet, but I knew I wanted to have them ready. I also made a few quiet calls, one to my accountant, one to a friend who did marketing work, and one to my buddy Drew from the shop. They didn't know all the details, but they knew enough to help me make sure everything about my business looked as professional as possible. By the time the night of the dinner rolled around, I felt something I hadn't felt in years walking into my parents' house. Confidence. No more quiet smiles. No more forced laughs. This time, I was going in on my terms. And when I saw Ethan's smug grin from across the room and heard Mom call out, "There's my boy. We're so glad you made it," I just smiled back, because they had no idea what was coming. The night of the dinner, we got to my parents' house right on time, which was a first. Usually we'd be the ones rushing in last minute, apologizing, trying to squeeze in between conversations that had already started without us. Not tonight. Tonight, I walked in tall, holding the door open for my wife and kids. Emma clutched the drawing she'd made for Grandma. Max carried the loaf of fresh bread we'd brought from a local bakery. The first thing I noticed was how crowded the house was. Everyone was there, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. Ethan stood near the kitchen with a beer in hand, grinning like he'd been waiting for me. "Caleb," Mom said brightly, coming forward to hug me. "So glad you could make it. And you brought bread." "Perfect. Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice calm and steady. Dinner was loud, as usual, but this time I didn't shrink into the background. I asked my cousins about their jobs, laughed at my uncle's jokes, even told a few of my own. For once, I felt in control. But the real moment came after dessert. Mom clinked her glass, standing at the head of the table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," she said with a smile. "We wanted to share something exciting with you tonight." I felt every eye turn toward her, and I knew this was it, the moment she'd been building toward. "As you all know, we've been talking about setting up a family fund," she continued. "And we think now is the perfect time to make it official. It's a way for us to support each other, to make sure the kids never go without, and to keep this family strong for generations to come." There were murmurs of approval around the table. Ethan stood up beside her, clapping his hands together. "And we're asking everyone to contribute. Whatever you can, of course, but we thought it might be nice if Caleb could kick things off. Set the tone for the rest of us." All eyes turned to me. In the past, I would have felt my stomach drop. I would have fumbled for my wallet, thrown in more than we could afford, and sat there red-faced while everyone clapped politely. Not tonight. Tonight, I smiled. I'd be happy to kick things off, I said, pulling out the folder I'd brought with me. I placed it on the table in front of me and opened it slowly, letting the room quiet down. But before we do that, I think it's important that we're all on the same page about what family support really means. There was a pause. What do you mean? Mom asked, her smile faltering slightly. I took out the first page, a printout of the text from 2 years ago, the one where she told Dad not to invite us on the vacation because I'd complain about the cost. I read it out loud. The room went still. Then I took out another, the screenshot of the message asking me to double my family fund contribution because Ethan's kids had some big expenses coming up. And another, the photo of Sophie's surprise party that we hadn't been invited to. And another, Dad's voicemail asking me to cover Ethan's truck payment. Each one, I laid carefully on the table, my voice calm, and even as I explained exactly what it was and how it had made me and my kids feel. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. By the time I was done, the table was silent. Ethan's smirk had vanished. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad's jaw was tight, his face red. So, I said finally, leaning back in my chair. Before we talk about contributions, I want to make sure everyone understands why we won't be participating. I let the words hang there. We've been excluded from birthdays, vacations, even Christmas, I continued. And every time, we smiled and said nothing, because we didn't want to rock the boat. But that stops tonight. I'm done teaching my kids that being quiet is the same as being respected. I saw my wife's hand slide into mine under the table, a small squeeze of solidarity. You want to build a family fund? I said, looking straight at my parents. Great, but you're going to have to do it without us. We're not interested in paying for other people's parties while our kids sit at home wondering why they weren't invited. For a long moment, nobody said anything. Then Ethan scoffed. Wow, Caleb, really dramatic. You could have just said no. I turned to look at him, still calm. I did say no. Repeatedly. You just didn't like hearing it. His face went red, but before he could say anything else, I reached into my folder one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the business card my accountant had made me, listing me as owner and operator of my shop, with a little note about our upcoming expansion. I don't need your money, I said, placing it gently on the table. I don't need your fund. I don't need anything from you except distance. And then I stood up. We're leaving, I said quietly. I didn't slam the chair back. I didn't storm out. I just gathered my kids, who were watching wide-eyed but strangely calm, and walked them to the door. But before I left, I turned back one last time. You wanted me to set the tone tonight, I said. Consider it set. And with that, I walked out, leaving the table, the papers, and the stunned silence behind me. The drive home was silent at first, but not the heavy kind of silence we'd been carrying for months. This was lighter, almost peaceful. Emma broke it first. Daddy? She asked softly from the back seat. Yeah, kiddo. She smiled a little. You didn't yell. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Nope, I said. Didn't need to. Max nodded, solemn as always. You told the truth. That hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. And that was exactly what I'd wanted them to see. When we got home, my phone was already buzzing. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and more texts than I could count. I set it face down on the counter and left it there. The next morning, it started again. Mom called first. Caleb, she said the second I answered, her voice tight. I can't believe you embarrassed us like that last night. I didn't embarrass you, I said calmly. I just told the truth. You didn't have to do it in front of everyone, she snapped. Yes, I said quietly. I did. Because if I'd said it privately, you'd have brushed it off like you always do. This way, nobody gets to pretend it didn't happen. She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, you made your father very upset. Good, I said. Maybe now he'll think twice before asking me to pay for Ethan's truck. She gasped, scandalized. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being clear. And then I hung up. Over the next few days, the fallout rippled through the family. One aunt texted me privately to say she'd been biting her tongue for years, that she'd seen how my parents treated us and felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. A cousin called and apologized for never inviting my kids to their pool parties, saying she'd just gone along with whatever Grandma planned. Even my grandparents, who rarely got involved, sent a card in the mail that simply read, "We're proud of you for standing up for your family." But the loudest reaction, of course, came from Ethan. He called 3 nights after the dinner, his voice tight with anger. You think you're some kind of hero, he sneered. You just made everything worse. Mom hasn't stopped crying since Saturday. Maybe she should think about why she's crying, I said evenly. This family was fine until you decided to make it about you, he shot back. I almost laughed. Ethan, this family has always been about you. I just finally said it out loud. He started to say something else, but I cut him off. Don't call me again unless it's to apologize, I said, and hung up. For the first time in years, the house felt calm. And then something happened that I hadn't expected. A few weeks later, Mom and Dad showed up at the shop. I was in the middle of an oil change when I saw their car pull into the lot. My stomach knotted for a moment, but then I stood up, wiped my hands, and walked out to meet them. Caleb, Dad said gruffly. Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. There was a long pause before Mom finally spoke. We didn't realize how bad it had gotten, she said softly. We thought you were okay with it. That you didn't mind. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't mind my kids being excluded? Didn't mind being asked to pay for things I wasn't even invited to? She flinched. No, I guess we didn't think about it like that. For the first time, I didn't rush to make her feel better. I meant what I said. I told them. I'm done pretending. I'm done letting my kids grow up thinking it's normal to be treated like they don't matter. If you want to be part of their lives, you can, but it has to be on equal terms. No more secret parties. No more special treatment for Ethan's kids. No more guilt trips. Dad shifted uncomfortably. And if we can't promise that, I shrugged, then you won't see us. It's that simple. We stood there for a long moment, the air heavy between us. Finally, Mom nodded slowly. We'll try, she said. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was a start. They left a few minutes later, and I went back to work, my hands steady. That weekend, for the first time in months, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat from Mom. Dinner at our place Sunday, it read. Everyone invited. And this time, when we showed up, there were 4 gift bags by the door, 2 with Ethan's kids' names on them, and 2 with mine. Emma's face lit up when she saw hers, and I felt something in my chest unclench. It wasn't perfect. It might never be perfect, but it was different. And as I sat at the table that night, watching my kids laugh and eat and actually be included, I realized that this was the real revenge, not the silence I'd left them with, not the papers I'd put on the table, but the fact that they were finally treating my kids like they mattered. As we drove home, Emma leaned forward from the back seat and said, Daddy? Yeah, kiddo. She smiled. That was fun. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back and meant it. Yeah, I said. It was. And just like that, I knew the game had changed for good. My name's Evan. I turned 30 last week. I didn't expect much for my birthday. I'd gotten used to quiet celebrations, just a slice of cake at my desk, maybe a movie if I wasn't too tired. Still, I thought this year might be different. I don't know why. Maybe because 30 felt big. Like maybe they'd finally see me as more than just the help. The invitation came through the family group chat 2 days before. Mom, Sunday dinner at 6. Nothing fancy, but come by if you can. No happy birthday text. No cake emoji. Just if you can. Like I might have something better to do. And maybe I did. But I went anyway. I always did. I showed up right on time. They lived in the same house I'd been paying the mortgage on since I was 22, after Dad lost his job and Mom's hours got cut. I'd picked up side gigs, freelanced through college, ate noodles so they didn't have to. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. That was 8 years ago. The house still looked the same. Paint peeling near the porch, garden neglected. My little brother Jason's car, a brand new Jeep, sat in the driveway. Mom always said he needed wheels to stay motivated. I was still driving the same used Honda I bought junior year. The door opened before I could knock. Jason grinned and clapped me on the back like he'd just let me into his party. Yo, about time. We already started eating. I walked into the dining room, and, sure enough, everyone was halfway through their meal. My plate sat at the far end of the table. Cold. Nice of you to show, Dad muttered without looking up. He reached for the potatoes and passed them straight to Jason. I sat down without a word. No one said happy birthday. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not Jason or my Aunt Carol, who somehow always gets invited even though she once said I looked malnourished and underachieving. I waited, thinking maybe they were saving something for dessert. A candle. A card. Something. Anything. Instead, when the plates were cleared, Mom reached into her purse and handed me a small white envelope. "Don't expect much," she said without a smile. "You still haven't earned it." I froze. I hadn't even opened the envelope yet, but the tone, it was already stinging. Jason laughed from across the table. "It's probably a coupon for some therapy. God knows you need it." I opened the card. It was one of those generic drugstore ones, blue and white, a cartoon of a dog with a hat. Inside, someone had scribbled in black pen, "Happy birthday to the family leech. Maybe this year you'll grow up." There was no signature. No love, Mom and Dad. Just that. My hands were still. My chest felt hollow, like someone had vacuumed out all the air. I looked up. Mom sipped her wine. Dad was picking something out of his teeth. Jason was grinning at his phone like he hadn't just helped gut his older brother. Then Dad said, without looking at me, "Honestly, we should have cut you off years ago. You act like we owe you something." I didn't say anything. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly. Because in that moment, something in me snapped, not in anger, not in pain, but in clarity. They didn't even know. They didn't know I'd been covering their car insurance for the past 3 years. That I'd been paying Mom's medical copays directly through the pharmacy. That I'd paid the last tax penalty so they wouldn't lose the house they now use to insult me in. They didn't know about the spreadsheet I updated every week to keep track of every cent. They didn't know because I never asked for credit. But maybe that was the problem. Dinner ended with the usual sighs and Jason asking if I could Venmo him for the difference on some tickets he claimed he fronted for a trip I never even went on. I nodded again, said I'd take care of it, because I wasn't about to ruin my own plan by blowing up too early. I got in my car and sat there for 20 minutes, just watching the porch light flicker. My fingers hovered over the ignition, but my mind was somewhere else. 8 years back, maybe, remembering the first night I transferred money for their mortgage and told myself it was love, not obligation. That night, I opened my laptop. I didn't sleep. I just started clicking. Passwords, logins, old files, bank portals, freeze here, revoke access there. I didn't rage. I didn't type in all caps. I moved like a surgeon. I didn't just pull the plug. I rewired the entire circuit. Mom's pharmacy account, disabled. Auto payments, canceled. Joint utility logins, revoked. Every family Amazon account, Spotify, Netflix profile, and Uber Eats card they ever linked to me, gone. And I left them one last gift. One final message in the family group chat. But before I hit send, I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading what I'd typed in the family group chat draft. There was no yelling in it, no swearing, no long-winded speech about how they'd failed me or broken my heart. Because I realized they didn't care enough for any of that to hit them. Not really. If I wanted them to feel what I felt, shock, silence, and a slow sinking horror, I needed to speak in their language. Money. So I kept it short. Effective immediately, all payments I've made on your behalf are canceled. You called me a leech. I figured I'd stop feeding. Good luck out there. Then I hit send. No emoji. No signature. Just that. I muted the chat and closed my laptop. Monday morning, I didn't get up at 6:30 like I usually did. I took the day off. I slept in, made real coffee, went for a walk. I sat in the sun and tried to remember the last time I'd done something. Anything, without checking whether Mom's copay had posted or whether Dad's cell bill had bounced again. I had space in my chest I didn't know I'd been missing. It felt like breathing air that didn't belong to someone else. By noon, I had 3 missed calls from Jason. By 2 p.m., the group chat went from silent to panicked. "Mom, Evan, the internet's out. Can you check if you paid the bill? We can't log in." Jason, "Dude, why's the power off?" Dad's yelling, and I'm literally missing work calls. Aunt Carol, somehow chiming in from Florida. "This feels very petty, Evan. We've always supported you emotionally even if we had our disagreements." I didn't respond. I just read them, one by one. Watch the tone shift from smug confusion to mild irritation, then panic. Then, at 3:41 p.m., I got a call from Dad. I let it ring. He called again, this time from Mom's phone. Then again, unknown number. I finally picked up the 4th call, just to see what tone he'd use. "Evan," he said, calm at first. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. "Your mother's been crying," he added, like that was supposed to guilt me into something. Still, I said nothing. "I just think it's childish to pull the rug out from under your family. I mean, fine, you don't want to be part of things, that's your choice, but we had systems in place." You can't just cancel things without warning. You're right, I said finally. I should have warned you. He paused. So you'll fix it? No, I said. I should have warned you 8 years ago, when I started paying for everything. When I let you insult me with your mouse while living off my back. But I didn't. And that's on me. There was a long silence. Then Dad muttered, "You've always been so dramatic." I smiled. "And you've always been entitled." Then I hung up. No screaming. No theatrics. Just a quiet click. That night, I got an email alert from the mortgage servicer. Your account login has been updated by another user. They tried to get in. I'd already locked it. And I wasn't done yet. The next day, I filed the paperwork to remove my name from every joint account I'd ever been added to. I called every company and sent every document. I even made a spreadsheet with all the account numbers I'd been linked to over the years, just to make sure I hadn't missed a single one. Then I started looking at property records. Because you see, the house wasn't in their name. It was in mine. It always had been. 8 years ago, when they were too deep in debt to qualify for a mortgage, I'd bought the house under my name, told them it was a family workaround so we could keep the roof over their heads. I let them believe it was theirs. I let them make the rules. I let them disrespect me in a house I legally owned. But I wasn't going to make that mistake anymore. 2 days later, I booked an appointment with a real estate attorney. Quiet, professional, no drama. I explained the situation, showed the deeds, the payment history, the texts. He looked at me and said, "You've got every right to do this." I nodded. He leaned back in his chair and added, "Do you want to evict them or sell the house outright?" That was the turning point. That's when it stopped being about punishment and started being about freedom. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my phone, scrolled through years of family messages, photos, passive-aggressive jokes, guilt trips, and reminders to help out because we're struggling. Then I went back to that birthday card. "Maybe this year you'll grow up." I looked at the attorney, smiled, and said, "Let's list it." The house hit the market a week later. Quietly. No for sale sign on the lawn. No warning dropped in the group chat. Just a discreet listing through the attorney's recommended realtor. She was sharp, efficient, and not the type to ask personal questions when you said, "Yes, I own the house." No, they don't know that yet. We scheduled the first walkthrough for a Tuesday afternoon. I picked a time I knew Mom would be at her weekly church volunteering shift, and Dad would be out at one of his endless, networking lunches that never seemed to lead to a job. Jason, as usual, was probably gaming upstairs with noise-canceling headphones on. The realtor brought in a couple and their young daughter. They were polite. The wife looked around at the kitchen and said, "It has potential, doesn't it?" I could hear her tone, already imagining repainting the cabinets and knocking out the ugly half wall. The husband asked about the HVAC and the roof. I had the answers ready. I'd paid for both repairs just last year, after all. Halfway through the tour, I heard a door slam upstairs. Jason came thudding down the hallway in socks, hair unbrushed, wearing pajama pants. He looked from me to the couple and back again. What's going on?" he said, frowning. The little girl smiled and waved at him. The wife said, "Sorry, is this a bad time? We didn't realize." Jason turned to me. "Dude, why are people walking through the house?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked around the living room, the same one where I sat countless nights during college, laptop on my knees, trying to stretch my freelance gigs just enough to cover another month of their bills. Then I turned to Jason and said, "It's not your house, Jace." Never was. The realtor stepped in quickly, offering the couple a quick look at the backyard while I handled things. They nodded and went outside. Jason's face turned red. "Okay, what does that mean?" I raised an eyebrow. "Exactly what it sounds like. This house is under my name. Legally. I've been paying the mortgage. And I've decided to sell it." He blinked. Once. Twice. Then he laughed. A short, stunned kind of laugh. "You're joking." "Nope. That's not even. Like, you can't do that, dude. Mom and Dad live here." "Correct. And they've been living here, rent-free, while calling me a leech. And handing me birthday cards with insults inside." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked suddenly very, very young. "You really didn't know?" I asked. "After all this time?" Jason shook his head. "They always said they own the house. That they let you live here, sometimes out of pity." I stared at him. "You thought I was living here out of pity?" He rubbed the back of his neck and looked away. "I mean, you never had friends over. You never brought girls around. You were always working, always stressed, because I was paying for everything. So you could sit in your room and stream video games. He swallowed hard, like the math was starting to click. And then we heard the front door open. Mom. She came in holding a half-empty cup of iced coffee, chatting on the phone. She didn't see the realtor or the couple in the backyard yet. Just me, standing with Jason in the living room. Oh, Evan, are you finally fixing the sink? Because. Then she noticed his expression. What's wrong with you two? I didn't answer. She stepped closer and narrowed her eyes. What's going on? Jason turned toward her, voice low. Mom, did you know Evan owns the house? The pause that followed felt like the universe holding its breath. Mom's face didn't twitch. Not an inch. Then, slowly, she lowered her drink and said, Jason, don't be ridiculous. We let him sign the papers because his credit score was better. That doesn't mean he owns it. I smiled. She still didn't get it. The deed is in my name, I said. Calmly. I made the down payment. I've been paying the mortgage. This isn't your house. Her face twitched then. Not fear. Not sadness. Rage. You ungrateful little. How dare you try to throw your parents out of their own home, she hissed. I didn't flinch. Mom, you threw me out first. You've been throwing me out piece by piece for years. When you laughed at my job. When you called me a disappointment in front of your friends. When you used my money and told people I was a failure. She crossed her arms. So this is revenge? You're evicting your family? On your birthday? I laughed once dryly. No, this isn't revenge. This is closure. Then the realtor walked back in with the couple, smiling politely. We just love the layout, the wife said. And the backyard's perfect. I think we'll put in an offer. Jason looked at Mom. She looked at me. And I looked at the future I should have claimed years ago. Mom didn't speak again, not right away. She just stared at me like I was a stranger who had broken into her living room. Jason stood behind her, quiet now, his earlier cocky smirk gone. The couple was chatting with the realtor about offer terms and contingencies as if they were talking about curtains and countertops, not the implosion of the family who still technically lived there. I stepped outside to give them space and waited near the mailbox, hands in my pockets, watching the wind ruffle the weeds in the front yard I used to mow. A minute later, the realtor joined me. They're ready to move forward, she said. They love the place. Good offer above asking. They can waive the inspection if needed. I nodded. Let's do it. She tilted her head slightly. Are you sure you're okay with all this? I looked at her. She wasn't being nosy, just doing her job, making sure the seller wasn't about to pull out for emotional reasons. A lot of people second-guessed themselves when family was involved. But I didn't. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. By the time I walked back inside, Mom had taken her meltdown into the kitchen, where I could hear the telltale clinking of her wine glass being filled to the rim. Jason had disappeared, probably sulking in his room or texting someone for validation. Dad still wasn't home yet, but I could already imagine his reaction when he found out what had happened. Some overdramatic speech about betrayal, maybe a fake heart issue thrown in for sympathy. He'd always been good at performative outrage. The house was weirdly quiet after the buyers left. I sat on the edge of the couch, taking it all in, every picture on the wall I'd paid to have framed, the TV I'd bought after Dad cracked the old one during one of his outbursts, the broken lamp in the corner from a fight Jason started last Thanksgiving. All of it sat in silence, like a museum exhibit called Things Evan Paid For but was never allowed to touch. It was strange. Not sad. Not nostalgic. Just strange. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed in the guest room upstairs, the one Mom once called my pit stop whenever I needed to feel like a real adult. I laid down, stared at the ceiling, and didn't sleep. Not out of stress, just clarity. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of Dad yelling downstairs. You're telling me he's selling it? You let him do this? I didn't move. I let them stew. When I finally came down, Dad was pacing the kitchen in an undershirt, phone in hand, probably trying to call the bank or the police or some long-forgotten cousin who might be a lawyer. Mom sat at the table, pale and quiet now, like the fight had drained out of her. She looked older than she had the night before. You want to explain what this is? Dad barked, waving a copy of the listing the realtor had emailed him after the showing. I think the listing speaks for itself, I said calmly. He stepped closer. You can't just. Stop. I raised a hand. Before you say anything you can't walk back, you should know that everything I've done is documented. I've got every payment, every bank transfer, every utility bill. The deed. The title. The insurance. The taxes. He opened his mouth. I cut him off. And I've already spoken with a lawyer. That shut him up. Where are we supposed to go? Mom finally asked, her voice small. It was the first real question anyone had asked me in years. One that didn't sound like a demand or a guilt trip. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. You had 8 years, I said softly. 8 years to figure that out. 8 years of my income, my credit, my time. You could have saved. Gotten jobs that lasted. Treated me like a human being. She looked away. Dad slammed his mug down. You're no better than the rest of them, he snapped. Turning your back on your family. No, I said, standing tall. I'm finally turning toward myself. Jason crept down the stairs behind him, looking unsure. Wait, are you actually serious? Like, for real? Yes. But I live here. Not for long. He blinked, like a kid being told Santa wasn't real. I have nowhere else to go, man. I shrugged. Neither did I when I was sleeping on couches trying to keep the lights on in this house. But I figured it out. I walked over to the counter and grabbed the envelope that held the buyer's preliminary offer. 30 days, I said. That's how long the closing process takes. After that, I suggest you find your own way. Like I did. And with that, I left. Not forever, yet. But for the moment, that was enough. I had one last move to make. And it wasn't selling the house. It was something bigger. The offer closed exactly 31 days later. I signed the final paperwork at the attorney's office with the kind of quiet, unshakable confidence I never used to have. Not around my family, at least. The realtor slid the check across the table, and I didn't even blink. It wasn't just a payment. It was proof that I could build something, own something, finish something, without anyone else's name stapled on top of it like a participation ribbon. I didn't go back to the house that day. I didn't help them pack. I didn't check in to make sure they were okay. I'd given them nearly a decade of those things, and they'd handed me back sarcasm, silence, and debt. But I did leave one thing behind. A folder. Printed, not digital. I knew Dad wouldn't open an email unless it was flagged urgent in red. Inside the folder was a document titled, Things You Claimed I Never Did. It included a spreadsheet with every dollar I'd paid on their behalf. Mortgage statements, grocery bills, health insurance premiums, credit card payoffs I'd made without telling them, just to keep their accounts open. Every Uber I'd ordered when Mom had her surgery. Every textbook I'd bought for Jason that he never opened. Every time I'd covered an overdraft fee so their lights wouldn't get shut off. There was even a screenshot of the birthday card they gave me, labeled My Thank You. I left it on the kitchen counter. That was the last time I ever saw that house. Or them. Within a week of the sale, the calls started again. First from Mom, crying. Then from Jason, bargaining. Then from Dad, angry voicemails about family betrayal and shame. I didn't pick up. I didn't reply. Instead, I moved. I left the city. Quietly. Changed my number. Got a new bank. A new apartment. Modern, quiet, full of light. Paid in full. No roommates. No roommates I had to raise, anyway. For the first time in my adult life, I had no debt. No secret bills to cover. No emergencies that always required my wallet, but never my well-being. I didn't even realize how light my chest felt until the second week passed without a single call asking for something. I started going to therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where you journal in a notebook your mom later reads, by accident. I started eating better. Sleeping better. I signed up for a pottery class on a whim. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for between double shifts and family meltdowns. And then, one day, 6 months after the sale, I got a letter. No return address. Just a wrinkled envelope, forwarded through my old billing address. It was from Jason. The letter started like this. I still think you went too far. But I also get it now. He said he was living in a shared apartment across town. Working part-time. Cooking his own meals. Paying rent. For the first time in his life. He said it sucked. He also said it was the first time he understood what I must have gone through. That he hadn't known. That they'd told him I liked taking care of things. That I needed to feel useful. He closed the letter with, I don't expect you to forgive us. But I hope someday you'll talk to me again. Even if it's just to tell me I was a fool. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Not ready to respond. Not yet. But maybe one day. Mom and Dad never wrote. I don't think they ever will. And that's fine. Because I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm free. They used to call me the family leech. But I was the lifeline. And I finally let go. Now, I don't walk on eggshells. I walk on tile floors I picked out myself, in a place where no one calls me a disappointment for not buying groceries I never ate. I have peace. I have space. And on my 31st birthday, I bought myself a real card. It said, "Congratulations. You made it out." I signed it with my own name. That was enough. My name is Brian. I'm 32, and for the past 7 years, I've been the unofficial safety net for my entire family. I never thought of myself as someone who took care of everyone. But looking back, that's exactly what I've been doing. Whenever my younger brother Jason couldn't make rent, I covered it. When mom's car broke down, I paid for the repairs. When dad's consulting business had a slow month, I slipped him a few hundred just until the next client comes through. I never complained, not once. I told myself it was what a good son and older brother should do, help out when he could. And I could. I have a decent tech job, I live well below my means, and helping them never seemed like a big deal, until last Sunday. We were all sitting in my parents' living room, mom, dad, Jason, and me, half watching a football game on TV. It was one of those lazy Sunday afternoons where the house smelled like coffee and the hum of the game was the only noise. Out of nowhere, Jason turned to me with this smug little grin and said, "So, Brian, where's your wife and kids?" "Oh right, you don't have any." Mom actually laughed. Dad chuckled under his breath. And Jason leaned back like he'd just delivered a killer punchline. I sat there for a second, stunned. Normally, I let stuff like that slide. Jason's always been the golden boy, younger, more charismatic, the one who somehow turns every bad decision into a charming anecdote. I've heard my fair share of digs from him over the years, but something about the way he said it this time, with that smug little grin and everyone else laughing along, hit me harder than usual. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, no kids." But inside, it felt like something snapped. The next few minutes were a blur of casual conversation and lighthearted jokes, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept thinking about every time I'd bailed Jason out. Every time I'd gone without a vacation so mom and dad wouldn't lose the house. Every time I'd skipped something for myself so they could have what they needed. And here they were, laughing at me like I was some kind of punchline. When the laughter died down, I turned to Jason and, in the calmest voice I could manage, said, "Where's your money?" "Oh right, I've been supporting you, until today." The room went dead silent. Jason's grin faltered. Mom's eyes widened. Dad leaned forward like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell, but the way I said it landed like a hammer on the coffee table. And that's when everything started to shift. For a few seconds after I said it, you could have heard a pin drop. It was the first time I had ever spoken to them like that, not with anger, but with finality. Jason was the first to recover. He leaned forward, that grin sliding back onto his face, though it looked a little more forced this time. "Wow," he said, chuckling. "Touchy much?" "It was just a joke, Brian." Mom gave a nervous little laugh and patted my knee, like she was trying to smooth things over. "You know your brother, he's just teasing. Don't take it so seriously." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at Jason, feeling that hot pressure in my chest that I'd been ignoring for years. "A joke," I finally said. "Right." Dad shifted in his chair. "Look, Brian, we appreciate what you do for this family, but there's no need to get dramatic. Jason's young, he's just having fun. You can't expect him to be as responsible as you." That line, "you can't expect him to be as responsible as you," was like gasoline on a fire. I'd heard variations of it my entire life. Jason wasn't held to the same standards I was. Jason didn't have to get straight A's in school. Jason didn't have to pay rent when he moved back home after dropping out of college. Jason didn't have to do anything but show up, flash that charming smile, and the world bent around him. And apparently, I was supposed to keep enabling it. I didn't argue then. I just stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "I'll see you later." I didn't slam the door on my way out, but I wanted to. That night, I went home and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, looking over my bank statements. Thousands, no, tens of thousands, of dollars had gone to my family over the years. Rent for Jason, bills for my parents, emergencies that somehow never got paid back. I had brushed it off every time because I thought I was doing the right thing. But sitting there, staring at the numbers, I realized something. I had made it way too easy for them. The next week was quiet, but not in a good way. I got a couple of texts from Mom, "You okay?" And Jason didn't mean it, you know how he is. But I didn't reply. I needed space to think. By Thursday, I was starting to feel a little better, a little more grounded, when I got a call from Dad. "We need to talk," he said. I sighed. "About what?" "About the bills. The mortgage is due, and I know you usually cover the difference. You haven't sent anything this month." I felt that hot pressure in my chest again. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I'm not doing that anymore." There was silence on the other end for a beat, and then Dad said, "What do you mean you're not doing that anymore?" "I mean," I said, "that I'm done paying for everything. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being laughed at while I bankroll everyone else's lives." "Brian, you can't just stop. Your mother and I rely on that money." "That's the problem," I said. "You shouldn't." He started to get angry then. I could hear it in his voice, that low rumble he used when I was a kid, and he wanted me to know I'd crossed a line. "You're being selfish. This family has always supported each other." I almost laughed at that. "Has it?" I asked. "Because I don't remember anyone supporting me. I just remember being told I had to take care of everyone else." Dad hung up without another word. That weekend, I got invited, well, more like summoned, to Sunday dinner. I almost didn't go, but some stubborn part of me wanted to see what they had to say. When I walked into the house, I could feel the tension like a wall of heat. Mom was setting the table with extra force, like each plate had personally offended her. Dad was sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed, face like stone. Jason was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. Dinner started quietly enough, but halfway through, Mom finally said, "Brian, we can't keep going like this. Your father and I have bills. Jason has his student loans." I cut her off. "Jason dropped out of college." She blinked, surprised, but kept going. "And you make more than enough to help out. You've always done it before." "That was before," I said. "Before I realized I'm the only one here actually trying to be an adult." Jason looked up from his phone then, smirking. "Oh, so now you're better than us because you've got some money?" I turned to him, my voice sharp. "No, I'm better than you because I work for it. You sit around all day pretending you're figuring your life out while you burn through my paycheck." Jason rolled his eyes. "Whatever. You're still single. Can't be that great of a life." That was the moment something inside me just settled. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done explaining, done defending, done playing the role they had written for me since I was a kid. I put my fork down, looked around the table, and said, very calmly, "I'm not paying for anything else. Not the mortgage. Not Jason's rent. Not the car insurance. Nothing. If that means you lose the house, that's on you." Mom gasped. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Don't talk like that in this house," he barked. I stood up. Then maybe I shouldn't be in this house. I walked out before they could stop me, my heart pounding, but my head clearer than it had been in years. The next day, the call started. Mom, Dad, even Jason, all leaving voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart, how I was choosing money over them, how I didn't understand the pressure they were under. I listened to every single one, sitting at my kitchen table again, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. But I could feel it coming, the next step. The moment when the pressure wouldn't just be words on a voicemail. The moment they would try to force me back into my old role. And when it came, I was ready. The voicemails kept coming all week, and by Friday, I had stopped even listening to them. I'd go through my day with my phone on silent, see the missed calls piling up, and feel a strange mix of dread and relief. Dread, because I knew something was coming. Relief, because for the first time in years I wasn't rushing to fix everything. But Sunday morning, I got a text from Mom that was short and direct. "We're coming over." My stomach sank. I considered ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home, but I knew that wouldn't stop them. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, I heard a knock at my door, not a polite knock, but the kind that carries an unspoken message, "Open up." When I answered, Mom was standing there with that tight smile she used whenever she was pretending everything was fine. Dad was right behind her, looking grim, and Jason trailed in last, wearing a hoodie and looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Brian," Mom said, brushing past me into my apartment. "We need to talk." I shut the door and followed them into the living room, where they all sat down like they owned the place. "We can't keep doing this," Dad said without preamble. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage now. The bank is calling. If you don't help us, we could lose the house." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "I told you. I'm done." Mom's face tightened. "You're being unreasonable." This is your family's home. You grew up there. Yes, I said. And I'm not going to bankrupt myself to keep it because no one else is willing to step up. Jason snorted. You act like you're some saint. You make good money. It's not like you're hurting. Why not just do the right thing and help? Because, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, it's not help anymore. It's expected. You all sit around waiting for me to save the day every time, and I'm done doing it. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Mom took a deep breath, like she was steadying herself, and said, Fine. If you won't do it voluntarily, we've already taken care of it. I frowned. What does that mean? Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder, setting it on my coffee table. We went to the bank, he said. We co-signed your name on a home equity line of credit. The funds are already transferred. The house is safe for now. My stomach turned to ice. You what? Mom rushed to explain, her voice rising. We had to. They were going to start foreclosure proceedings. We didn't have a choice. Yes, you did. I said, my voice low and dangerous. You had every choice. And you chose to forge my signature. Jason spoke up then, grinning like this was all some kind of joke. Hey, look on the bright side. You didn't even have to lift a finger this time. It's like you're the hero without even trying. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Do you even hear yourself? You just admitted to committing fraud, with my name, and you think this is funny? Jason shrugged. It's just money, Brian. Relax. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed the folder and flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. There it was, my name, my information, my forged signature, all tied to a loan I hadn't agreed to. Tens of thousands of dollars that I would now be legally responsible for. You had no right, I said, my voice trembling. None. Dad's jaw tightened. We had every right. This is about keeping the family together. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the greater good. I laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. The greater good? That's what you're calling it. You stole from me. You used my credit, my name, to bail yourselves out again. And you didn't even ask. Mom's eyes welled with tears. We didn't want to put that kind of pressure on you. You've been so stressed lately. I stared at her, stunned. So instead you just went behind my back? Jason leaned back on the couch, smirking. Honestly, you're overreacting. You've been carrying us for years. What's the difference if you do it one more time? And that was it. That was the moment something deep inside me went quiet. Not angry quiet, ice quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you stop expecting anything to change and realize you have to be the one to change it. I closed the folder carefully, set it down on the coffee table, and looked at each of them in turn. Get out, I said. Mom blinked. What? You heard me. Get out of my apartment. Dad stood up, his face red. Don't talk to your mother like that. I said get out. I repeated, my voice like stone. They hesitated, exchanging looks, but something in my expression must have told them I wasn't bluffing, because after a moment they all got up and left. Jason was the last one out, and as he passed me, he muttered, You're such a drama queen. I didn't reply. I just shut the door behind them and locked it. Then I sat down on the couch, staring at the folder like it might burst into flames if I looked away. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust. Trust they had shattered completely. And as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. They weren't going to stop. Not until I made them. After they left, I sat in my living room for what felt like hours, the folder still lying on the coffee table like some kind of cursed object. Every time I looked at it, my stomach knotted. The numbers glared back at me, the total amount of the loan, the interest rate, the payment schedule, and my forged signature, a mocking reminder that my family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head. The way Mom had said, we didn't have a choice, like it was some kind of excuse. The way Dad had stood there, justifying it like it was noble. The way Jason had laughed, as if this was all some kind of entertainment for him. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea I didn't even drink, and sat back down at the table. The apartment was so quiet it almost hurt. I'd always thought of myself as close to my family, maybe not emotionally, but in terms of duty. I'd always been there when they needed me. And now? Now I felt like I didn't even know who they were anymore. The next morning, I dragged myself to work, but I was barely functional. My coworkers probably thought I was sick. I just sat at my desk, staring at my screen, clicking through emails without reading them. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. By Tuesday, the voicemails had shifted from pleading to guilt-tripping. "Brian, this is your mother. I can't believe you threw us out like that. Your father hasn't slept in 2 days. Jason is stressed out. We did what we had to do. You'll understand when you have a family of your own." That one hurt more than I expected. The implication that I wasn't a real adult because I didn't have a wife and kids, the same thing Jason had mocked me for, stung more than I wanted to admit. Wednesday, Jason texted me directly. "Stop acting like a victim. You're fine. Just pay it and move on." I didn't reply, but by Thursday, the pressure started to feel unbearable. My chest was tight all day, my head pounding, my stomach in knots. I went to bed early but lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. How I had gone from being the dependable one to being the enemy in the span of a week. That weekend, I drove past my parents' house just to see if it was still there. I don't even know why. Maybe to convince myself this was all real. The lights were on. Jason's car was in the driveway. Everything looked normal from the outside, but I knew better. Inside that house, they were probably talking about me, spinning the story into some narrative where I was the villain who had abandoned them. I didn't stop. I just kept driving, past the house, past the edge of town, until I ended up at an empty overlook where you could see the whole valley. I sat there for a long time, engine off, watching the sun go down. That was my rock bottom, sitting in the dark, alone in my car, realizing that the people I had sacrificed for, the people I thought I was protecting, had never really respected me. They saw me as a resource, not a person. A bank account with legs. I went home that night and made a decision. I wasn't going to fix this. Not this time. Not for them. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. I read everything I could about what to do if your identity is used without your consent. I called my bank the next morning and asked to speak with their fraud department. I explained what had happened, carefully, calmly, and asked what my options were. The woman on the phone was sympathetic but blunt. It was complicated. Because my name and information were used, and because it was my parents who had done it, this would involve police reports, legal filings, maybe even a court case. When I hung up, I just sat there, letting that sink in. If I went down this path, there would be no going back. My parents could get into serious legal trouble. Jason might finally have to face real consequences. And the entire family would probably never forgive me. For a moment, I almost backed out. I almost convinced myself to just pay it off and keep the peace, like I always had. But then I thought about Jason's smirk, about Dad's righteous anger, about Mom's tears, not tears of apology, but tears of guilt-tripping manipulation. And I thought about how I felt sitting in that car, staring at the valley, realizing how alone I was. No, they had made their choice. And now I was going to make mine. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparation. I pulled my credit report and locked it so no one could use my information again. I changed my passwords, updated my online banking security, and made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my aunt who had always been the one relative I could talk to. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival, about finally taking back control of my own life. But deep down, as I gathered documents and wrote everything down, I could feel something darker growing. A quiet anger, patient and steady, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I knew that moment was coming. Meeting with the lawyer was the first step, and it felt like stepping into a new world. Her name was Rachel, and she had the calm, measured presence of someone who had seen every kind of family drama you could imagine. I sat across from her in her office, clutching the folder my parents had left in my apartment like it was radioactive. "Brian," she said after going through the papers, "this is serious. What your parents did is not just unethical, it's criminal. Forgery, fraud, identity theft. You have every right to fight this." I nodded slowly, my chest tight, but not from panic this time. "I don't want to destroy them," I said. "I just want my name cleared. I want them to understand they can't do this to me anymore." Rachel leaned back in her chair, thinking. "Then we approach it strategically. We can send a demand letter first, formally notify the bank that you did not authorize this loan. It will trigger an investigation. That alone will put pressure on them. If your parents don't resolve it, we escalate legally." Hearing it laid out like that gave me a strange kind of clarity. For so long, I had felt like I was reacting to them, rushing to fix whatever disaster they created. Now, For the first time, I felt like I was ahead of them, like I had the upper hand. When I left her office, the air felt different, lighter. That week, I threw myself into work like a man possessed. I had been coasting for months, showing up, doing the bare minimum, going home exhausted from the emotional toll of dealing with my family. But now I had a purpose outside of them, and it showed. I finished a big project that had been sitting half done on my desk, stayed late a couple of nights to help my team hit a deadline, and by Friday, my manager called me into his office. "Brian, this is excellent work," he said, holding up the report I'd just finished. "I've noticed a real shift in you lately. Whatever's going on, keep it up." I walked out of that meeting with a smile I hadn't worn in months. For the first time, my life wasn't about just keeping my family afloat. It was about building something of my own. I started taking better care of myself too. I cleaned my apartment until it felt like a fresh start, stocked my fridge with real groceries instead of takeout, and even signed up for a gym membership I'd been putting off for years. Every evening, I'd go for a run or lift weights, feeling the stress bleed out of me one rep at a time. Meanwhile, Rachel sent the demand letter. The bank acknowledged it within 2 days, and just like that, things started moving. The loan was flagged for investigation. I got a call from the fraud department, this time not as the guy trying to figure out what to do, but as someone taking decisive action. "This is exactly the right step," the representative told me. "Once we verify the signature was forged, we can remove your liability." Hearing those words was like taking my first full breath in weeks. Of course, my family didn't take it well. Mom called crying. "Brian, how could you do this? The bank called us. Do you know what you're putting us through?" I listened calmly, then said, "Yes, exactly what you put me through." She went quiet after that. Jason sent me a string of angry texts, most of them saying things like, "You're ruining everything," and "If the house gets taken, it's your fault." I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I started quietly preparing for whatever would come next. I opened a separate savings account, moved some of my money into it, and set up automatic transfers to build it even faster. I updated my will and beneficiaries, something I'd never bothered with before, and even consulted a financial advisor. "Your situation isn't uncommon," the advisor said when I explained why I wanted to protect my assets. "A lot of people with financially dependent families don't realize they need to shield themselves legally until it's too late. You're doing the right thing." I walked out of that meeting with more than just peace of mind. I had a plan, and as the weeks went by, things kept getting better. I got a raise at work, nothing huge, but enough to feel like my efforts were paying off. I started sleeping through the night again. The tightness in my chest eased. Even my apartment started to feel different, warmer, quieter, mine. One Friday evening, I found myself standing at my window, looking out at the city lights, holding a glass of wine. And for the first time, I didn't feel that crushing weight of responsibility. I felt free, but under that freedom, something else was building. Not just relief, not just peace, something sharper. Because every voicemail from my parents, every passive-aggressive text from Jason, every attempt to make me feel guilty was fuel. And I wasn't just ignoring it anymore. I was collecting it. I started saving every message, every voicemail, every text. Rachel told me to keep a record of everything, and I did. Not just because it was legally smart, but because each one reminded me why I was doing this. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about drawing a line, about making sure they understood that if they crossed me again, there would be consequences. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just going to stop them this time. I was going to make sure they never tried this again. By the time the bank's fraud investigation really got underway, I had already shifted into a different mindset entirely. The Brian who used to panic whenever his phone lit up with a family call was gone. I wasn't scrambling to put out fires anymore. I was quietly stacking the kindling, planning exactly how to light it when the time came. One Thursday morning, I got an email from the bank confirming they had sent handwriting samples and documents to a forensic analyst. The words "suspected forgery" were right there in black and white, attached to my case number. I forwarded the email to Rachel, who called me almost immediately. "This is good," she said. "It means the bank is taking this seriously. Once the report comes back, we can move to have your name removed from the loan entirely. And if your parents are smart, they'll refinance it themselves before it goes any further." "Do you think they will?" I asked. There was a pause. Then Rachel said, "If they don't, they're going to find themselves in a very uncomfortable situation." I thanked her, hung up, and sat back in my chair, thinking. The old me might have felt a pang of guilt hearing that. The new me felt something closer to satisfaction. But it wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. I wanted to make sure they never put me in this position again. So I started digging, carefully, methodically. First, I checked the county property records. It turns out my parents' house wasn't just behind on the mortgage. They had a second lien on it from a personal loan they had taken out 2 years ago. I didn't even know about that one. The balance was high, the interest rate was worse, and if they didn't start paying it down soon, they were at risk of default. Then I pulled Jason's name in the public records database. What I found didn't surprise me, but it still made my blood run cold. He had 3 unpaid traffic tickets, a delinquent credit card account, and an eviction filing from an apartment he'd lived in last year. All public record, all sitting there like little time bombs waiting to go off. I wasn't going to use any of this yet, but knowing it gave me leverage, the kind they couldn't take away from me. Meanwhile, my lawyer put me in touch with a financial investigator she sometimes worked with. His job was to trace money and build a clear picture of where funds had gone in cases like mine. I handed over everything I had: bank transfers, old receipts, screenshots of Venmo payments, every line item showing just how much of my money had kept my family afloat. When he sent me the report 2 weeks later, I just sat there staring at it. In 7 years, I had given my family nearly $86,000. $86,000. It wasn't just the amount, though that number made my stomach twist. It was the pattern. The investigator had laid it out in a timeline, showing every payment and what it had been for. It was like looking at a history of every time I'd said yes to keep the peace, every time I'd swallowed my pride to be the responsible one. Rachel called me after reviewing it. "This is powerful," she said. "If it comes to court, this paints a very clear picture of financial exploitation. It shows a pattern, not just a one-time mistake." I thanked her and hung up, my mind already racing. I was starting to see the whole picture now. Not just what they had done, but who they really were. And that made my next steps easier to plan. I spent the next few weeks preparing quietly, living my life on the surface like nothing was wrong. I kept excelling at work, even earning a spot on a big upcoming project that could lead to a promotion. I kept going to the gym, kept eating well, kept sleeping better than I had in years. And at the same time, I built a kind of dossier. I printed out the financial report, the bank's investigation emails, the county property records, even Jason's court filings. I put them all in a neat, organized binder and kept it in my desk. It wasn't about waving it in their faces, not yet. It was about being ready. The calls from my parents slowed down eventually, though they didn't stop completely. Mom left one voicemail that sounded almost rehearsed. "Brian, your father and I have decided to put the house on the market if things don't improve. We hope you understand we're under a lot of stress. We'd still like you to reconsider and help out, just until we get back on our feet." I didn't call her back. Jason, on the other hand, started getting more desperate. His texts switched from angry to pleading. "Bro, please, I need help with rent this month. Landlord's threatening eviction. You've got the money. Just one more time. I swear I'll pay you back. This isn't just about me. If I get kicked out, Mom will freak. You don't want to do that to her." I stared at that last one for a long time before closing my phone and setting it face down. I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. By the end of the month, I felt like a different person entirely. The anxiety that had once eaten me alive was now something sharper, a clear, steady resolve. I had the evidence, the legal support, the financial stability. For the first time in years, I felt like I had real power. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was done waiting for them to make the next move. If they wanted to play games with my life, it was my turn to set the rules. The day I decided to act was quiet and sunny. One of those deceptively calm mornings where everything feels normal, almost peaceful, right before a storm. I got up early, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table going through the binder one last time. Everything was there: the financial report, the forged loan documents, the property records, Jason's delinquent filings. It was more than just a stack of papers now. It was leverage. Rachel and I had spent weeks refining the plan. She didn't push me toward court, though she made it clear we had a solid case if we wanted to file. Instead, she suggested we give them a chance to correct it first, in writing, formally, in a way that put everything on record. "We'll draft a settlement letter," she said. "It'll demand they refinance the house and remove your name from any accounts within 30 days. If they refuse or ignore it, We escalate. But this way, you've shown good faith. And if we do have to go to court, the judge will see you tried every reasonable step first. It was exactly the kind of move I wanted to make. Calm, strategic, unshakable. The letter went out on a Monday. It was 3 pages long, clear and professional, outlining every instance of unauthorized use of my information and every dollar I had been forced to cover over the past 7 years. At the end, it stated in no uncertain terms: failure to comply within 30 days will result in legal action, including a police report for forgery and fraud, as well as a civil claim for financial exploitation. I didn't even have to deliver it myself. Rachel sent it by certified mail. All I had to do was wait. And wait I did. The first call came from Mom 2 days later. "Brian, what is this? We just got your lawyer's letter." "It's not a letter from me," I said evenly. "It's from my attorney. It outlines exactly what needs to happen next." "You can't do this to us," she said, her voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what it will do to your father if this becomes public? Do you have any idea what it's done to me already?" I asked. There was a long pause before she said, "We'll talk about this at dinner. Sunday. Please come." I almost said no. But then I realized this was exactly the moment I had been preparing for. Sunday came, and I arrived on time, binder in hand. The house felt smaller than I remembered, cluttered, a little shabby, like the strain of the last few months had settled into the walls. Mom and Dad were waiting at the kitchen table. Jason slouched in a chair off to the side. "Brian," Dad started, "this is ridiculous. You're threatening to drag your own family into court. Over money." "No," I said calmly, setting the binder on the table. "Over fraud. Over 7 years of being used like a personal ATM. Over the fact that you thought forging my name was an acceptable solution to your problems." Jason rolled his eyes. "Here we go again." I opened the binder and slid the financial report across the table toward them. "This is every payment I've made for you since I was 25. Nearly $86,000. Rent, mortgage, utilities, car repairs, emergencies. I kept you afloat while Jason figured himself out, while you two kept taking out loans you couldn't pay. And I never asked for a dime back." Mom's face went pale. I took out the forged loan documents next and laid them on top of the report. But this is where it stopped being help and started being theft. Dad's jaw worked, but he didn't say anything. Then I looked at Jason. "And you think this is all some big joke? You think you can keep calling me every time you run out of money and I'll just bail you out again? But here's the thing. I've got every eviction filing with your name on it, every unpaid bill, every delinquent account. I know exactly how deep you're in." Jason's smirk faltered. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to refinance the house and remove my name from the loan within 30 days. You're going to stop using my information for anything, ever again. And you're never going to ask me for money again. If you do, I file this binder with the court, and the 3 of you can explain yourselves to a judge." Silence. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice small. "And if we can't refinance?" I met her eyes. "Then you lose the house. And that will be on you, not me." Jason muttered something under his breath, but one sharp look from Dad shut him up. I stood, collected my binder, and walked to the door. "You have 30 days, I said, turning back one last time. "Use them wisely." When I left, I didn't feel triumphant exactly, not yet. But I felt something better. I felt in control. And as I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. The 30 days that followed were quiet, unnervingly so. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't lighting up with family drama every few hours. At first, it was almost disorienting. Then, slowly, it started to feel good. Peaceful. Like breathing fresh air after living too long in a smoke-filled room. Rachel checked in every week, keeping me updated on the bank's progress. 2 weeks in, she called with the news I'd been waiting for. The handwriting analysis came back. The signature was confirmed as a forgery. "You are officially cleared of any liability for the loan. They'll issue you a formal letter in the next few days." I sat there at my desk, holding the phone to my ear, feeling something in my chest unwind. "So that's it." "That's it," Rachel said. "From here, the bank will hold your parents responsible for the debt. Whether they refinance or not is up to them." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out over the city lights with a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. The weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. I wasn't just free, I was untouchable. And then the real fallout began. 2 days later, Mom called. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail, her voice shaking. They called, Brian. The bank called. They said the loan is now solely in our names. We can't make the payments. Your father is talking about selling the house. I don't know what we're going to do. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. I didn't feel smug, exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either. They had brought this on themselves. By the 4th week, the house had officially been listed for sale. I found out not from them, but from the property records I'd been quietly monitoring. They must have priced it low because it went under contract fast. The following Sunday, Mom texted me again. Dinner. One last time. Please come. I hesitated for a long moment before agreeing. Not because I thought they deserved it, but because I wanted to see this through to the end. When I arrived, the house was half empty. Boxes lined the hallway, furniture was missing from the living room, and there was an air of something final in the air. Mom looked tired, older somehow. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him, his jaw set. Jason was pacing, his hands jammed into his hoodie pocket. This is what you wanted, right? Jason said as soon as I walked in. House is gone. We're screwed. Congratulations. I didn't rise to the bait. No, I said calmly. This is what you chose. I gave you 30 days to fix this without losing the house. You didn't. Mom sat down heavily, her eyes glassy. We couldn't qualify for refinancing without you. We tried. We really did. I almost believed her. Maybe they had tried, but it didn't matter anymore. The point wasn't whether they had made an effort. The point was that they had finally been forced to carry the weight themselves. Dad looked up from the papers. We'll have enough from the sale to pay off the debt. Barely. After that, we'll rent for a while. I nodded. Good. That's what responsible adults do. They live within their means. Jason snorted. Easy for you to say. You've always had money. I turned to him, my voice sharper now. I had money because I worked for it. Because I didn't blow it on vacations I couldn't afford, or max out credit cards, or ignore my bills until someone else had to pay them. Jason looked away, his face red. Mom's voice was small. So that's it then? You're really cutting us off. I took a deep breath. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just stepping back. I'm not your safety net anymore. If you fall, you fall. And you figure out how to get back up without calling me. Silence settled over the kitchen. It wasn't the tense, angry silence from before. This was something heavier. Acceptance, maybe. I stood, looking around the house one last time. The house I'd grown up in. The house I had fought so hard to save for so long. You know, I said quietly, I used to think it was my job to keep this house standing. To keep all of you standing. But maybe this was what needed to happen. Maybe losing it is what finally forces all of us to grow up. No one said anything. I walked to the front door, hand on the knob, then turned back one last time. This is the last time I'm coming here. The next chapter of my life doesn't include this house, or the version of me that lived in it. If you want to be part of that next chapter, it has to be on different terms. Equal terms. And with that, I left. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The house was gone, but so was the burden I had carried with it. For the first time in years, my future felt like it belonged entirely to me. When I got home, I put the binder back in my desk drawer. Not out of spite, not as a threat, just as a reminder. A record of where I'd been, what I'd survived, and what I'd finally walked away from. As I closed the drawer, I caught my reflection in the dark window and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I was smiling.